We say, face facts. We talk about encounters with reality, as if it were a head-on meeting of completely alien agencies, and the average person has the sensation that he is a someone that exists inside a bag of skin.
Change. How do we grasp change? In many ways, it's a necessary, unstoppable force. We have to change. Many people believe that change is something that we do at random intervals of our lives. When a loved one passes on, when a child is born, or they get a new job, these are all things that people would point to as big changes in their lives, reasons that they change as a person. It is as though people believe we are not always changing. That is to say that we believe as though there are time periods of stasis in our lives where nothing happens, but then suddenly a big shift occurs. When in reality, we're always changing, every moment. But I think many of us got into our heads that we are not in line with reality, and that change is something we stumble into. A lot of my personal philosophy is derived from this belief. We are in an ever-changing river that we all go down. Sometimes there are pieces of art that are made that I think perfectly embody change. In particular, the medium of video games does this really well. Being totally immersed in a world created for my entertainment is one of the few ways I have to cope with change. It may sound silly, but I honestly believe many lessons have been taught to me via video games. Accepting change is a massive theme that runs deep in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, though it's not one that I think most people would immediately notice. The game's world, story, and characters are all undergoing massive change. The game itself is a representation of change from the normal 3D Zelda formula. I think if we look at this game on a deep level, we can find that its many mechanics, stories, and world are all meant to teach the player about change and accepting it. Today, I will be deep diving into Breath of the Wild. We will cover everything from the main story to the tiniest Koroks hidden in the wild. To say this game is a rich world would be an understatement. It's not just rich, it's dynamic. And the ways we interact with that world are dynamic as well. Much of our progression comes not from the items we obtain or the better gear that we find, but from our knowledge of the world itself and our place in it. I want to celebrate this game's 8 years of life today with this multi-hour long retrospective, but I also want to share the knowledge I've gained over the years about change and how I think Breath of the Wild has a wonderful lesson that most of its audience may never learn. Because I love you, I've decided to chapter each section of this video, though that was not my original plan. You can check the description below for timestamps for each section. Additionally, if I for some reason mess up information or find I missed some footage, you'll hear this sound. I know many people like to listen to these videos rather than watch them, and trust me, I'm the same way, but I will be putting a ton of work into the editing, and some moments may feature things I want you to see. So if you hear that sound, it means you should probably look at the screen for some information that I may have missed, or maybe something that you should pay attention to. Hopefully I don't have to use it too many times though. And because I'm a super nice guy, I'll put each background song's title on the screen for about a moment when it pops up. I've had people in my comment sections before ask me about various pieces of music I use in my videos, so I figured I could just give you all the titles right off the bat. Finally, and I will reiterate this later in the video, I have no plans of making a video about Tears of the Kingdom. I'll explain why later, but that's all I'll start with. Anyway, let's get into it. Breath of the Wild in many ways changed my life. I was the first person in my high school to get a Switch. You can bet your ass that I was proud of that, and I was proud to show it off along with the biggest Zelda game ever, maybe one of the biggest games of all time. Those first few months of owning a Switch and playing Breath of the Wild are ingrained deep into my brain. I will never forget the feeling of first exploring this version of Hyrule, uncovering shrines, talking to the various locals, and conquering the divine beasts. Even when it was all said and done, defeating Calamity Ganon didn't really feel like the end. It felt like a beginning. I had so much more to do after him, and the DLC made that experience even better. As you will come to find through this video, I consider Breath of the Wild to be the epitome of games as an art form, and there's quite a few reasons I believe that. Some background for you, though, I have well over 1,200 hours into this game, and a few hundred into its sequel. There's a reason I've played the sequel considerably less, but that's a story for a different day. Due to this, I feel uniquely qualified, as someone who is not at all qualified to talk about video games in a serious manner, to talk to you about this video game in a serious manner. There have been countless videos talking about what makes Breath of the Wild so great, but none that I think really delve into the heart of what makes it so special. What makes Breath of the Wild as an art form uniquely special in the vast sea of other games? While I will be discussing the game's various mechanics, much like any other review would, it will be discussed not for the sake of just reviewing them, though I will certainly give my opinion, but for laying the groundwork for why I think this game is one of the best single works of art in my lifetime. In order to discuss what makes Breath of the Wild so great, I think it's important to discuss what makes a Zelda game a Zelda game. Many people have claimed that Breath of the Wild is, in fact, not really a Zelda game, and honestly, at first glance, I think this argument is very short-sighted. I think it's incredibly silly for the fans of an art piece to argue over what is and what is not the art when the artists themselves have laid out pretty clearly what it is supposed to be. For example, if I make music in a particular style and then I decide to switch it up for my next album, some fans might say that's not really Garrett's music. And this is completely incorrect. It takes away agency from the artist. If it's my music, I can make it however I want, and some people may not like that, but it's maybe not for them. I do, however, understand this argument about Zelda. 3D Zelda has pretty much followed the same formula since 1998 with Ocarina of Time. Nintendo has been very clear from the start with the purpose of Breath of the Wild, but for some reason people still feel a need to insist that it's not a real Zelda game. But in order to discuss this further, I think I need to get into what makes a Zelda game a Zelda game.
And in due course, Western painters began to be fascinated with the background, and they said to the figure, "Move over." And then there were landscapes. But of course, the people who looked at them and weren't used to this kind of thing said, "Well, that's not what I call a painting." But in time, they got used to it.
The Legend of Zelda as a series is defined by a couple things: exploration, story, and progression via new items. We can see this as far back as the original Zelda game in 1986. The first Zelda game has always been a bit of an enigma to me. The furthest I've gotten into it was the second dungeon, and after that point I really stopped giving a shit. As a game, it's far too cryptic to be played by yourself without any sort of a guide. The fact that the game's manual had to guide players to the first dungeon says enough about the limitations of the hardware that it was running on. I think Nintendo intended for people to play this game separately and then visit each other or take notes to share with each other about what they found. Hell, if you were way past lame and couldn't figure out what to do, you could call Nintendo's support number for tips. While I wouldn't recommend anyone play this game all the way through, it's much too long and boring for that to be honest, I think people should at least try it. Try to get through at least 2 of these dungeons. It's just enough for you to realize how held back the game's premise was by the hardware. It does set up key ingredients for Zelda games to come, that being exploration, progression, and dungeon crawling. Zelda 1 actually allows you to do a ton of stuff before your first dungeon. If you follow any online guide, they'll actually have you hit several key places and items before ever entering a dungeon. As such, the game theoretically would reward players for exploring the world and finding secrets. However, in practice, this shit is impossible to do without a guide. Unless you've already played it before, you're not finding the half of this stuff on your own. On the flip side, this means that the game is more rewarding for you if you are someone who has played it before. As you find stuff the first time around, you'll likely remember key points and items that you can use to get there sooner on your second time around. That freedom is really cool. While I may not enjoy Zelda 1 too much, it is foundational for every Zelda game to come. You are rewarded for your curiosity with shops, new gear, and full-on health upgrades. From here, Zelda games tend to take a more linear approach. It was obvious that the full potential of Zelda 1's formula could not be lived up to on 8-bit hardware. Zelda 2 lost a lot of that non-linear design. A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening only cemented its formula. However, with Zelda's jump to 3D, the series seemed to find its footing in this linear, narrative-driven style. As long as the game was capturing that same sense of grand adventure, what did it matter if you could do every dungeon in any order? Ocarina of Time is where each 3D Zelda game gets its formula. Every game after it more or less follows the tried and true formula that this game set up, which was honestly set up by A Link to the Past, so really it can all be traced back there. Ocarina of Time is, for lack of a better word, epic. It's an epic adventure. I first beat it on my 3DS back in high school and I loved it. I only got around to beating it after I beat Breath of the Wild. I wanted to go back and see the origins of 3D Zelda, and I'm very happy that I did. I still haven't beaten Majora's Mask or The Wind Waker, but I have beaten Skyward Sword, and honestly that might be my second favorite Zelda game, and recently Twilight Princess, which I think takes third place. Anyway, Ocarina of Time still allows for exploration and certainly rewards it, but it follows a rather strict formula that stems from A Link to the Past. That formula being, enter a dungeon, find a new tool in the dungeon, use that tool in the dungeon, beat the boss, use a tool outside of the dungeon to progress in a fairly linear fashion. This formula continues with each new 3D Zelda game up to Breath of the Wild. By the time we hit Skyward Sword, we see this at its peak evolution. While Ocarina of Time features a connected world where Link can travel each area separate only by maybe a loading screen, Skyward Sword takes this formula and kind of turns it on its head. The areas that would otherwise be fields or blank areas for Link to run around in between dungeons have now become puzzles of their own, with each area feeling more like a 3D Mario level than a typical open area like other games. The game preceding it, Twilight Princess, featured large open fields with frankly very little to do in them when compared to Skyward Sword. While I like Hyrule Field and Twilight Princess, I think the carefully crafted level design works better for a linear game, like Skyward Sword. This linear puzzle-like design works extremely well for me, personally, and I love that. I didn't always care for the backtracking through the same areas, but I did enjoy the way they would twist it up and the exploration that came from that because the world felt like one elaborate puzzle. Everything in Skyward Sword feels like a puzzle. Getting from one dungeon to the next is a puzzle. With this world, we got the most linear story-driven Zelda game to date. It focuses on guiding the player through its narrative story and not allowing the player to deviate from that path too much. With Skyward Sword being the first Zelda game in the timeline, I think it's imperative that they went this linear and story-focused route. This story is heightened by the interesting world that the game takes place in. If players were allowed to complete these dungeons in any order, that would probably kill a lot of the story. Something 3D Zelda games do very well is world building. The biggest flaw I've found in Ocarina of Time is that it doesn't really feel so lived in as it does a static, non-changing painting of a world. This is likely due to it being the first 3D Zelda game. There were bound to be growing pains. Majora's Mask, the quick follow-up to Ocarina of Time, recognizes that flaw and runs with it by putting the game in a 3-day loop explaining the NPC's repeated behaviors. They do and say the same things because it's the same 3 days occurring. The only change is when Link interacts with the world, and even then, most of those changes are reset when Link travels back in time to the beginning of the 3-day cycle. I haven't played much of Wind Waker, so I won't speak to that, but Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword do execute this lived-in world better than Ocarina of Time. To sum all of this up, I think that there are a few key ingredients that make a Zelda game, and those are a large world to find secrets in, dungeons and puzzles, rewarding curiosity, and a good story. Now that we have this in mind, we can ask ourselves how Breath of the Wild uses these ingredients, or notably, how it doesn't, all to make a new kind of Zelda game.
Now, if you breathe in and hold it, you lose your breath. But if you breathe out, it comes back to you. So the principle here is, if you want life, don't cling to it. Let go.
According to Nintendo themselves, Breath of the Wild was created to rethink the conventions of the Zelda series. It's clear that with Skyward Sword they had reached the apex of linear storytelling and needed to radically shift the series in a new direction. With their fancy new HD console, the Wii U, they finally had the power to make that open-world 3D Zelda game they had dreamed of so long ago. While Breath of the Wild certainly does rethink conventions, it is important to note what the game holds on to. Some mechanics are either adapted to fit this open-world style of game, and others are kept from the older 3D Zelda games entirely. Obviously, the story has been adapted, but largely follows the same beats. Notably, most of the story is already done by the time you play the game. Link has already been a hero, already a Zelda's appointed knight, he already got his hands on the Master Sword, Ganon has already come and gone, and the downfall of Hyrule has happened already. You're essentially playing an epilogue of the story, which is something that we'll touch on later. Other mechanics like items have just been adapted to fit this world better. The bow is no longer an item you find in a dungeon, it's just a common weapon that you can use throughout the world. Elemental arrows come back in the same way that you would expect, but this time they interact with the world in more interesting ways. Fire arrows not only just make fire, but they can burn plants, burn enemies, you can use those to make an updraft, there's just a lot more you can do with them. The bombs are back, but this time with a twist, this time being remote bombs that you can detonate at any time rather than just going off automatically after being used. This is great and honestly is my favorite implementation of bombs in Zelda. Gaining health is exactly the same as any other Zelda, to be honest with you. You beat a dungeon, you get a heart crystal or collect 4 spirit orbs, which are basically an evolution of heart containers, let's be real, and you get an extra heart. You can also upgrade your stamina wheel, which is nice to see come back from Skyward Sword in an upgradable and more useful fashion. But the point I'm trying to make now is that Breath of the Wild definitely still retains many of the features that previous Zelda games had made, just maybe with a twist. The biggest deviation from 3D Zelda is Breath of the Wild's open world. In order to explain this, I think I might walk you through the opening moments of the game. The game opens with a light and a strange voice calling for Link to wake up. Waking up, we find ourselves in a tight corridor that feels very unnatural. Blue lights line the walls. This feels very futuristic and certainly human-made. As we explore the game's tutorial area, the Great Plateau, we're gently guided along to 4 shrines or mini-dungeons that are all themed around a new ability that Link can use. The Great Plateau is a genius tutorial and perfectly encapsulates the large open Hyrule that players will now be traversing. It's so carefully designed to guide players along a path, but also gives them the freedom to go anywhere. From the beginning, you can walk off in any direction. Sure, 99% of players will go talk to the old man, but someone might try to jump down this cliff just to see what happens, only to be met with death. Others may try to climb the hill above, only to discover the temperature mechanic where they freeze to death. No matter what they do, they'll learn something about this world organically. Like I said, the plateau has almost everything you'll run into as you explore Hyrule at large. There are ruins, monster camps, one fairly noticeable boss fight unless you have Master Mode, in which case there's 2, and a little quest for you to get the warm doublet, and so many Koroks to get your hands on. This allows the player to get a feel for the world and force them to explore to learn about their abilities. Something I've always wanted to do is 100% the plateau before ever leaving it in a playthrough. It sounds kind of fun. Point is this area sets up everything for the game extremely well, rewarding curiosity and exploration, and it does so while intentionally not giving you the paraglider. It limits your ability to traverse so that you will learn all the unique forms of travel. From the start, we can see just how different this game is from Skyward Sword and the games that came before it. When they said they were rethinking the conventions of Zelda, they weren't kidding. Link moves differently in this game than any other Zelda game. It's a little hard to describe without playing it for yourself, but if possible, go back and play any 3D Zelda game prior to Breath of the Wild. You'll find that Link is a bit stiff, and it always feels a little bit off or clunky. Obviously, the level of swiftness and clunk varies from game to game, but they all feel kind of similar, except for Breath of the Wild. It just comes down to the small details. In Breath of the Wild, if Link wants to jump, you simply press the jump button. If you need to sprint, you press that button. Old Zelda games didn't even have a jump button, and Skyward Sword was the first game to introduce sprinting. Movement in these older games is rough sometimes. Walking up to a ledge would just make Link jump, and it felt very strange because it took a lot of the agency and control away from the player. And by the time we got to the GameCube, there's no excuse for not having like a jump button or something like that. I get they want to free up more buttons for slots for items, but come on, I can't tell you how many times I've accidentally fallen off a ledge or missed a spot because I didn't have the control of my jump. All of these games lack fluidity to their movement that Breath of the Wild has. Sprinting, jumping, strafing, and even horseback movement all feel great. It's super easy to get used to the feel of Link, and that natural movement helps sink yourself into the game. This all leads to a level of immersion that is not found in previous Zelda games. Most games in general don't have this level of immersion. It's very easy to lose track of time playing this game. You could find a truly stunning area and just chill out for a little while. I've used this kind of idea a lot on this channel when describing art, but maybe honestly too much, but I think it really applies to this game. Breath of the Wild has a story to tell, sure, but it's more or less allowing you to make a story, which in a way brings it back to the original game. You're allowed to just chill out. It's your little sandbox. Do what you please. You can exist for a while. They've given you the tools to fiddle around, but it's really up to you. You can make a mad dash for the Divine Beast and then Ganon, but you could also just wind bomb off a tower just to see how far you can go. Or take pictures of dogs. It's your game. You do you. A lot of this immersion can be explained by the game's amazing art direction.
So the artist doesn't really know what constitutes beauty. He doesn't know this for exactly the same reason that you and I cannot see our own heads and don't know how our brains work. Even the greatest neurologists don't know how the brain works, and they're the first people to admit it. They don't know how they manage to be conscious. They don't know how they make decisions. It just happens in the same way as you can move your fingers without knowing any physiology. You just do it. So in the same way, the artist manages to create the beautiful.
Before we get into the art direction, we need to first define what I mean by art. Lots of people think of art as the visual aspect of a game. How does it look? However, the art and design of a game encompasses much more than just the visuals. The art style, of course, is one thing, one very noticeable thing, but the sound design matters just as much as the visual design. If the game looks great but sounds like ass, that will kill the sense of immersion. While Breath of the Wild isn't my favorite looking Zelda game, that title goes to Skyward Sword, I do think it is objectively the best looking Zelda game. Everything in the game feels extremely connected and cohesive, except for when it's deliberately not trying to be, but we'll get to that. Every environment flows seamlessly into another. Nothing feels jagged or out of place. It's much more akin to the blending of paint between two different colors on a canvas, if it's done by a competent painter. Listen, if you paint, you'll know what I mean, but if not, I'm sorry, that metaphor is probably lost on you. Contrast this with another Switch game, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and you can see how cohesion can make or break immersion. This game feels gross and unpolished. Breath of the Wild feels like it was made by a dev team who were actually given enough time to finish it and give it care. Back to Breath of the Wild though, it's not just the environment either. Sure, the transition between the temperate forest to the jungles of Faron feels really cool and it's nice and smooth, but the architecture and character designs fit extremely well. Every major race in Hyrule feels like they belong in this version of Hyrule. The Zora look great, the Rito feel right at home in their area, and the Gerudo look proportionally confusing but nonetheless very fitting, and the Gorons, well, it's kinda hard to make Gorons look bad, let's be real. Breath of the Wild has these nice cel-shaded graphics that seem to lie somewhere between the style of Wind Waker and Skyward Sword. Generally, I really love this style. It's fantastical enough that we forgive some of the things for looking a little bit more goofy, but not so fantastical that we don't take it seriously. It kind of draws a perfect balance. For example, many people criticized Wind Waker when it came out because it was too cartoony back in 2002. In recent years, though, people have seemed to be praising its art style more and more with the HD release. Conversely, Twilight Princess's art direction was praised in 2006. It was what the fans really wanted, a more realistic and gritty take on Ocarina of Time style. Nowadays, most people would say that the Wind Waker looks better than Twilight Princess. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think they both suck compared to Skyward Sword, but that's just me. Some people will disagree. Fight me. Regardless, Breath of the Wild does have a fairly similar approach to art as Skyward Sword. Both of these games find a middle ground that lay between the cartoony and the gritty. Skyward Sword leans a bit more toward that Twilight Princess style, albeit might be hard to tell, and Breath of the Wild leans a little bit more toward Wind Waker. When making a big world that players want to feel immersed in, having super realistic graphics does not always translate to immersion. It can hinder the experience if you're not careful. I think many people mistake realistic graphics for an immersive experience, and that's just not the case. I get that it can be easier for some people to get immersed in a world that looks just like our own, but if you ask me, that makes it harder. If something looks like real life, then something happening that is wacky or unrealistic in the game can take me out of it. Is this purely a me issue? Yeah. With Breath of the Wild's focus on the finer details, we get an art style that isn't super realistic, but it feels like a real world. When looking at the world, it's very obvious that everything is cut from the same cloth. It is made with one vision in mind, and that vision is executed masterfully. The audio enhances this greatly. The game takes tons of inspirations from nature, and the soundtrack reflects that. In previous Zelda games, music is a staple. You hear it all the time. Exploring Hyrule Field and Ocarina of Time is always met with fanfare, and each town and dungeon has its own unique music to accompany it. But have you ever thought to ask, what else is there without this music? We don't really hear the birds chirping in Hyrule Field or the wind blowing across the grass. It just gets this big song. Breath of the Wild takes a very different approach to sound design, instead choosing to let the music of nature be the primary thing you hear. Birds chirp, owls hoo, the wind blows and the leaves rustle under your feet, and the snow crunches as you walk. The music is calm and reflective. It begs the player to just pause for a minute and breathe. Take it all in. This world moves on without any regard to your actions. you want to see what I mean, put on some headphones and just play Breath of the Wild. Just hang out somewhere and listen to the world. In many ways, playing Breath of the Wild evokes an experience very similar to hiking, for me at least. For example, when I'm hiking around Akala, I almost smell the autumn air. I can almost smell it. It reminds me a lot of being back in my hometown in the fall when the leaves would fall into the ground. When standing in the Hebra Mountains, I can almost feel that snow crunch as Link walks. I don't want to feel the sand of the Gerudo Desert, though. I don't want to feel that between my toes, but the game is just so immersive, I can't help it. It's not just nature sounds, either. It's how Link walks. Sure, the footsteps are nice, and that's honestly something that I really pay attention to in almost any video game. It's weird, but I really pay attention to that shit. Depending on what you're wearing and the gear you're carrying, Link will make different, louder or quieter sounds. If Link has no gear equipped and is walking around in a stealthy armor set, he is almost silent. If you put tons of gear and equip different armor, you can hear the gear clunking around on Link's back. This is even true when trying to walk slowly. It's in other people's actions too. We can hear people sweeping, people's various trinkets jumbling around the backpacks. Even the monsters make various sounds. And at first, yeah, this seems like a given. They of course make wacky sounds when they attack or when they're hit, but they also converse with each other. We can catch moblins and bokoblins just chilling and talking with each other, or dozing off for a quick nap. If you take the time to sit back and watch some monster camps for a bit, you'll find that they're pretty intelligent and capable creatures. When we take their weapons, they get angry and stomp their feet. They light their weapons on fire to do more damage. They make different sounds depending on their actions. Hell, you'll hear a Hinox snore if you get close enough. When I say that every creature in this game feels like it belongs in this world, I don't just mean visually. I mean their behaviors and their mannerisms help add to that level of immersion. You can watch a fox just yawn, for Christ's sake. They had no reason to put this animation in the game other than to immerse you. There are times, though, where the art style is deliberately jarring. There are times where things are supposed to stick out and feel unnatural. What do I mean by that? Well, the most obvious example is Sheikah technology. All throughout Hyrule, we see examples of ancient Sheikah technology used to fight Ganon 10,000 years prior to the main story of Breath of the Wild. The defining features of this technology are the blue, red, or orange lights and their metallic makeup. Take, for example, Guardian Scouts. These are the small robots meant to protect and guard Sheikah shrines. Most notably, Guardian Scouts are found in the Test of Combat shrines. Each one features a distinct blue glow and striking weaponry. Each weapon is bright blue and features those metallic beeping sounds when activated. This is very intentionally out of place. This doesn't feel like it belongs in Greater Hyrule by design. In fact, I don't think there are any instances of Guardian Scouts outside of shrines. I could be wrong on that. Someone could fact check me, but I don't think I've seen them other than Divine Beasts. Guardian Stalkers are another perfect example of this juxtaposed art style. Amongst the beautiful fields or rocky cliffs are these dangerous mechanical beings that can wipe out anyone with ease. Because of this, I can understand how one could argue that this sudden change in art style feels jarring and unnatural in a bad way. I disagree. I actually think it's quite good. Now, I want you to keep in mind that I'm someone who has played this for like a month and a half of my entire life, so I might be a little bit biased, but when I'm recalling my memories from back in 2017, I don't think I ever once thought that the Guardians or the Sheikah tech at large truly looked out of place. In their own odd way, they fit right in. We'll talk more about these guys later, but I'll kind of leave it there for now. The fact that this game can accomplish so much artistically and still feel cohesive says a lot. I imagine it would be very difficult to make a game that has a unified art style with such a big team of developers. In my mind, it would be far easier to have one or two artists design it all and ensure that it stays cohesive. This is quite an impressive feat, and that's true for any AAA game. The Zelda team, though, really nailed the art direction here. To cap this section off, I'd like to show off a couple of places that are my favorite areas in this version of Hyrule. I might go over this again when I talk about exploration, but here's just a few for now. First up is Toto Lake, more specifically this hill just southeast of it. From this hill you can see Death Mountain, the entire Akala region, and the sea. I particularly love the autumn trees of the Akala region. I just find this particular view to be stunning. It's pretty in Tears of the Kingdom as well. Second is the area around Dracozu Lake. Once you clear out all the enemies here, it becomes a really cool spot to just explore and look over the mysterious Zonai ruins. Of course, prior to Tears of the Kingdom, this area was ripe for fan theories, but Tears of the Kingdom, shockingly, did nothing to update this area with any meaningful way, or any of the Zonai stuff, to be honest with you. Regardless, coming here reminds me of that time I'd spend theorizing about the Zonai leading up to the release of Tears of the Kingdom. Oh, the tragedy of what could have been. Of course, the Spring of Courage is also here, another nod to Skyward Sword, which I also love. Next, don't worry, I only have one more after this one, is the cliff you see just after leaving the Shrine of Resurrection. This place is very nostalgic for me, as I'm sure it is for many of you who have played Breath of the Wild. Looking over the Great Plateau is always a pleasure. It reminds me of where my journey began 8 years ago. I recall my first time exploring the ruins of Ocarina of Time's Castle Town and the Temple of Time. I loved finding the King's Grave atop Mount Hylia and the tiny Bokoblin camp where I learned to do the whole bullet time bouncing thing before wind bombing became popular. If you ever just want to find a place to chill out and reminisce or get a feel for the world, this cliff offers a wonderful spot to do so. Finally, my all-time favorite spot in Breath of the Wild, Gyro's camp. Yeah, you ever see this guy? I think I went my entire first playthrough without ever seeing this guy, and he's right next to the Dueling Peaks Tower. So I do not know how I managed to avoid him for so long. He just has this random camp in the woods, like 20 feet from the road following the Squabble River. He just exists here. I love it. He gathers mushrooms and stuff from the forest and just hangs out. In Tears of the Kingdom, I can't find this guy. I have no idea where he went. So if any of you know where he went, let me know in the comments. I just love hanging out with him. It's kind of a random little fun NPC. While the design of this world is phenomenal, a world is nothing more than a glorified painting if there isn't much to do in it. Naturally, a big focus of Breath of the Wild is its combat. You'll be spending a lot of time fighting the various monsters as you explore Hyrule top to bottom, so how about we talk about the combat for a little bit?
From one point of view, change is just too bad. Everything flows away, and there's a kind of sadness in that. A kind of nostalgia. And there may be even a rage. Go not gently into that good night, but rage. Rage at the dying of the light.
Combat in the Zelda series has been really hit or miss for me. I think it's important to briefly discuss how combat has evolved leading up to the Breath of the Wild, or at least in the 3D games anyway. 2D games are a bit of a different beast. Most 3D Zelda games' combat revolves around swordplay. I will commend the Zelda team for trying to shake up the combat in each game. I imagine it's probably pretty difficult to do. While yes, a lot of the combat is just mashing the attack button, many enemies throughout the series require you to either time hits right or use various items to get an edge up. All of these interesting ideas had culminated in their most ambitious form of combat, one-to-one sword fighting in Skyward Sword, which depending on who you ask is either really cool or really annoying. Me, I can't really stand the motion controls, though I do see the value in them, so playing the HD version with its button-only control scheme was really cool. Though lately I have been playing the original version on my Wii U, which has helped me realize just how much the team worked on this feature. I know it isn't super appealing to a lot of people, but the Skyward Sword combat can be really intuitive and immersive. It feels like I'm swinging the sword, and that really cannot be understated. So what does Breath of the Wild do to innovate combat? Well, it obviously drops the one-to-one sword fighting thing in favor of a more traditional combat style that we'd see in other video games. Though it does feature many new ways to engage with the enemy, most of which have to do with the game's new physics engine, and I'll get to that a little bit. First, I want to talk about the things that are directly linked to the combat, like the stuff you'll use when you're actually fighting. Alongside Link's traditional sword and shield combo, we now have access to several new types of melee weapons. We have the traditional one-handed sword, a two-handed greatsword that swings much slower but packs more of a punch, spears that are a bit weaker than the one-handed swords but have a longer reach and faster attacks, alongside some more specialized weapons like hammers or boomerangs. There's also a couple of unique types of weapons, such as the Yiga Clan's Windcleaver, an Odachi type weapon that shoots out a projectile, or the spring-loaded hammer that just sends enemies flying and is very funny. This variety of weaponry is already far more than we've seen in any other 3D Zelda game. Sure, Ocarina of Time featured the Begoron sword, which had its own attacks and whatnot, but it's certainly nothing close to what we have in Breath of the Wild. Each of these weapons not only fits a particular playstyle, but a particular situation as well. Some enemies are more likely to dodge and jump around, so having the spear class with its extended reach and speed might be a better option than the one-handed sword. However, some enemies are made from stone, so having a hammer might be your best shot at knocking them out. Alongside this, Breath of the Wild radically changes how bows are used in Zelda games. In every previous Zelda game, the bow was treated as an item that you get from a dungeon, a weapon and a tool. You get one bow and maybe a couple different types of arrows with special functions. Breath of the Wild rejects this design and gives players multiple bows to suit their different needs. There isn't as much variation in the bow department as the melee weapons, but I think that's just kind of expected. Most bows are stronger or weaker than the variants of the next. More power, more range, faster draw speed, etc., etc. However, there are some unique bows that really do stand out to me. The Yiga clan is back this time with a bow that shoots 2 arrows at once. That's pretty cool, but it has like 14 damage, so it's pretty weak to be honest with you. Some bows, like the Lionel bows, fire multiple arrows in a fanned pattern. Other bows feature a longer range with less drop. All weapons in Breath of the Wild are used more as resources than individual tools that you keep throughout your entire game. The reason I say it's a resource is because Breath of the Wild introduces us to weapon durability. Now, we've had durability in previous games. Ocarina of Time features wooden shields that would burn, and notably Skyward Sword shields all break after some time, with the exception of the Hylian shield. Breath of the Wild takes this durability and applies it to all of the game's weaponry. Lots of people have negative opinions around this topic, and I am here to firmly say that the weapon durability is a good system, but it sure as hell ain't perfect. So before I get into the issues with weapon durability and my solution for said issues, I want to go through the argument as to why I think it's a good feature. The most obvious argument is that it forces players to use a variety of weapons and get used to using each type in any given scenario. This means that by roughly the middle of any given playthrough, players will be able to pick up any weapon and reasonably understand how it functions and the different ways they can use it. However, what I don't see people mention is the very real counterpart, your ability to counter enemy attacks. As you gain more knowledge about the weapons you're using, you'll come to realize that your enemies use these same weapons in almost the exact same way as Link. Of course, there is some variation here and there. For example, a bokoblin spinning around a large weapon will get dizzy, and at the end of their little animation, they'll stumble around, which is something that Link doesn't do. Also, moblins have much greater efficiency with two-handed weapons than other enemies do due to their large stature. Wizrobes use their wands in different ways than Link, but I think this can be chalked up to them being more adept with magic or something like that. By the end of any given playthrough, you should be able to recognize and counter attacks that come at you. The Test of Strength shrines are there to teach you different ways to combat each weapon type. As annoying and redundant as they can be, they're pretty useful shrines for your first playthrough. After your first one though, not so much. Even the final boss of the game is a test of your strength and abilities. You need to know how to counter and to weave around all different types of attacks to win the battle. A bit of a lesser argument in favor of weapon durability is the sheer number of different weapons in the game. There is no doubt in my mind that if Breath of the Wild didn't have weapon durability, we would see far less weapon variants in the game, if any. It feels like a necessity given the large number of cool swords and bows you could find in the world. You'll use everything from a royal broadsword to a mop as you progress. This of course ties into the compendium, which don't worry, I'll get to it, where you can take a photograph of any weapon you find. If there are any of your own reasons for liking the weapon durability, just please list them in the comment section below. I'd really like to hear them. Honestly, I think it's fun sometimes to just cosplay as different shit. Like if I want to be like Skyward Sword Link, I boot up Tears of the Kingdom because I'm not buying Amiibo, Jesus Christ, and put on the Sky set and just give myself the Goddess Sword and a wooden shield, just for the cosplaying of it. You could do this in Breath of the Wild too. Grab a soldier's sword and a shield and don the soldier's armor, and you can cosplay as being one of the many soldiers who gave their lives to defend the ground you stand on, all while killing guardians. That's pretty badass. A personal favorite of mine is the Royal Guard outfit, and then equipping the Master Sword and the Hylian shield. The colors just, they work so well. I digress about my choice of fashion. For now, I have yet to discuss armor. That being said, I do see the very real downsides to weapon durability too. I totally admit, once I hit the late stage of the game, my first couple of playthroughs, I dreaded any combat encounter, as it meant I would risk destroying my most valuable weapons. This is partially because I enjoy wearing cute outfits and having weapons that match those outfits. I can't let the nerds see that I don't have game. Thanks for asking, Mom. Listen, every time I see that little notification pop up at the top of my screen that one of my weapons is about to break, I too get a little pissy. I do feel like some of the weapons break a little too fast. Like the durability of a soldier's sword compared to a royal broadsword doesn't feel all that different to me. I mean, it might actually be different, and it is. It's 25 to 36 respectively, but the Master Sword only has a durability of 40 if it isn't upgraded, and I'm supposed to believe this is the Sword of Legend? Granted, if you do upgrade the Master Sword, the durability goes up to 188, which I definitely did notice. Overall though, yeah, I agree with most of the fans when they say that the durability is too low. Without the upgraded Master Sword, it does feel like I'm breaking at least one weapon per enemy encounter. Unless it's like one bokoblin that I'm beating the ever-living fuck out of for the 50th time. I wonder if their memories carry over from their past lives where I beat the shit out of them. I shudder at that thought. I honestly think a simple upgrade of like 33% more durability to each weapon, maybe not the upgraded Master Sword, would have been a solid improvement. This means stuff like the Royal Broadsword would break at 48 hits, surpassing even the Master Sword's original 40. I think that would be enough to feel fragile, yet effective. Now, why did I pick 33%? I don't fucking know, I just felt like it. For fun, I felt like 50% would be a little too much, and I didn't want to diminish the whole switch weapons mid-combat thing, so I'm sure we could pick a random numbers and we'd all have our little debate about it. I don't really care. The fun part of this whole discussion is the various solutions that have been thrown around for it. Nintendo themselves have kind of offered a half-baked solution in Tears of the Kingdom, where you can throw a damaged weapon into a rock Octorok, and it will spit out a repaired sword. This is nice. I use this a lot when I combine the Fierce Deity sword with the Bigoron sword. The maximum damage and maximum range is fantastic. It's great. However, this system is a little bit limited because of these Octoroks. They're a little bit obscure, and you kind of have to make a trip out to Eldon every time you want to repair something. It's far less efficient than it could have been. Though I do like that they went with a creative solution rather than just some generic thing. It's an evolution on how the Rock Octoroks work in Breath of the Wild, where they spit out usually a random clean version of a rusty weapon. I have a couple ideas that I think could either be put directly into the game, or someone much smarter than me could use as a launch pad for making something potentially kind of cool. Breath of the Wild has the player collecting lots of resources, whether it be monster parts, rare gems, or little critters. Breath of the Wild could have easily introduced an NPC that was capable of fixing damaged weapons if you used these items. Better yet, it could feature said NPC at each stable, akin to Beetle or the Sheikah Painter. Having someone at each stable who offers to repair weapons for various travelers would be a really nice addition to the world. I think it would be cool if you could even reroll some of the special abilities that weapons get. I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but some of the weapons can be picked up with like extra durability or long throw or something like that, just other various buffs. For example, let's say I get extra damage on my Royal Broadsword, but I don't really care for it all that much. I could pay this new NPC to reroll the buff. Perhaps I get long throw or durability increase. Maybe if I use a bow I can get a quicker draw speed. I think something like this would be kind of fun. Another thing that would greatly help is some kind of durability bar. As you swing your weapon, perhaps a tiny meter pops up displaying how many hits you have until it breaks, with it flashing red or something like that when it's about to break. Kind of like how Dark Cloud, when your weapons have like an HP that clearly tells you how many hits you have left. Obscure PS2 game reference aside, I do think that this helps alleviate a lot of the issues. I think this method beats Link being able to craft or repair weapons at any time. This isn't Minecraft. I don't want to stray away from Nintendo's idea of weapon durability too much. Pausing the game mid-combat to repair a sword would really break the flow, and I don't think that's something that players would really want to do. If you've got your ideas, I'd love to hear them in the comment section, but I do want to make it clear that I am okay with weapon durability as it currently stands in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Obviously, Tears of the Kingdom does it slightly better with the fuse system and the Octorok repair, but I think people who complain about this feature as though it's like a make or break thing for the game are kind of blowing things out of proportion. That being said, maybe it's a good time to transition to armor. I think Breath of the Wild strikes the perfect balance with armor that is both fun, stylish, and effective. As I mentioned earlier, I love cosplaying and wearing goofy outfits. Seeing your custom outfits in serious cutscenes is the funniest shit in the world. From the first Zelda game, Link has had different options for clothing he wears. Ocarina of Time is probably the most famous example up until Breath of the Wild, though many games before it and after it do feature other outfits for the hero. With Breath of the Wild heavily leaning into the theme of breaking the conventions of Zelda, ditching the traditional green tunic was a genius idea. I love the new look they have in this version of Link. He feels much more modernized and stylish compared to the dorky caps of yesteryear. Don't get me wrong, my favorite Link outfit is Skyward Sword. I love it. I love Skyward Sword. I've probably said that about 4 times in the script. I will defend that game until the end of time. But I will say that the Champion's tunic and the Hylian pants are a really close second for me. Before I go off in the deep end talking about every single version of Link and which one I think looks the coolest, I need to stay on track. I think it is extremely fitting that Breath of the Wild opens with Link being nearly naked. From the start of the game, we are made aware of Link's ability to not only change outfits like in previous games, but to wear no outfit if we see fit. Sometimes wearing no clothes does lead to some very comical dialogue with the various NPCs, especially Paya in Kakariko Village, who has a crush on Link. That's very funny. Poor girl. Imagine the hero of Hyrule that you have a crush on rocks up shirtless to talk to your grandma, and your grandma's like, alright. But I digress. The first clothes we get in Breath of the Wild are the well-worn shirt and pants. Besides being rugged and clearly very old, the sleeves are too short and the pants are also too short, and overall it just doesn't really look comfortable. I think this encourages us to find new pieces of armor as fast as possible. Frankly, Link looks uncomfortable in these clothes, and we don't want our hero to be uncomfortable. Thankfully, there are a few pieces of clothing that are super easy to get as soon as the game starts. The Hylian pants are found in a chest just right next to the Temple of Time, the warm doublet can be earned by doing a little quest for the old man, and finally you can get the Nintendo Switch t-shirt if you bought the DLC. It's very funny to see Link in like this high fantasy world wearing a t-shirt. While the t-shirt doesn't do much good, the pants and doublet have their own advantages, that being 3 added defense and cold resistance respectively. The warm doublet also looks like something a previous version of Link would wear when adventuring into the mountains of ancient Hyrule. It isn't until we're past the Great Plateau and done a few quests that we finally get our hands on the Champion's Tunic. By this point, you might have found yourself several pieces of armor, such as the Hylian set, a basic garb for travelers, or perhaps the Sheikah set, a special set designed for stealth, though lacking in the defensive capabilities. This gets me into some of the main functions of the various armor sets. Though some are purely for raising defense, like the soldier set, there's much more to armor in Breath of the Wild. Like I mentioned earlier, the warm doublet raises Link's defense against the cold temperatures. If Link is too cold, he'll slowly lose health. Donning this doublet prevents that from happening. But some areas are much colder than the plateau. As such, the Rito armor is the perfect choice for more extreme temperatures. Other sets are made for raising Link's attack, or his swim speed, or making you essentially invisible to the undead enemies for some reason. These can make or break certain situations. For example, the DLC Phantom armor set grants Link a total of 24 defense and increases his attack by 50%. For Master Mode or early game, this is an insanely powerful set of armor and is fairly easy to get your hands on if you know where to look and sneak around Guardians. If you're fighting tons of Guardians, the Ancient Armor set offers Ancient Weapon Proficiency, increasing the attack damage of Ancient Weapons by 80%. It also significantly reduces the damage that Link takes from ancient attacks like Guardian Beams, on top of its already super high defense stat of 84. However, there are times, particularly with the DLC armors, that I find it can be a bit busted. Majora's Mask is extremely useful and fun, allowing you to basically go by almost every enemy camp without any danger. Bokoblins, Moblins, and Lizalfos and all the stall variants will not attack you. Even Lynels will wait longer to attack you if you wear this. This is a really cool piece of gear and I love that it's in the game, but it is way too easy to find. It's basically right next to the Great Plateau, meaning that any playthrough can be made significantly easier with very little effort. This item is particularly effective because it combines the abilities of several pieces of armor that you can get from Kilton, the strange fella obsessed with monsters who runs the Fang and Bone shop. By trading him monster parts for his currency, Mon, you are able to buy things like the Bokoblin mask, which stops Bokoblins from attacking you, unless you provoke them, of course. However, Moblins and Lizalfos will see right through your little disguise. You can also buy Moblin and Lizalfos masks, which have the same effect on their respective monsters. This works so well because it forces you to pick one, rather than all of them at once. It has real limitations, but if used in the right scenario, can be incredibly effective at avoiding combat. Majora's Mask spits in the face of that, and it takes significantly less effort to obtain than any of these monster masks. It trivializes other mechanics. You nearly have to go out of your way to avoid it. Poor Kilton's gonna go out of business. Other DLC armors aren't nearly as offensive. The Korok mask is extremely useful, and the Tingle set is probably the best thing that Nintendo has ever designed. Most of the base game's armor, however, feels right at home, and they all have a distinct purpose. Even the Champion's Tunic, which has the highest defense rating of any single armor piece, has the added benefit of allowing you to see the HP of a monster. That's pretty cool. This is a shockingly useful feature. If I can see just how much HP my enemy has left, I can calculate how many hits it has until it's dead. This is especially useful in the Test of Strength Shines, where Guardians go through phases of attacks. Knowing how many hits are left in relation to how long I have until they switch up their phase can sometimes change how I approach the fight. Honestly, this wasn't even something I was consciously thinking about until I was writing the script. I didn't realize just how often I would make these split-second calculations of how many more hits my foes had. Some armor is even required to progress the main story. I especially love that Gerudo Town requires Link to wear Gerudo armor, as it makes him look more like a woman. Yes, I am aware you can get in by wearing the Thunder Helm and the Sand Boots, but the original look is just beautiful. And as a nice bonus, it protects Link from the heat. That's pretty cool. Not to hate on it too much, but Skyrim features lots of armors and clothing. Unfortunately, Skyrim gives you very little reason to change armor sets as you play. Hell, it rarely gives you a reason to change clothes at all. Sure, the various armor sets look cool, glass armor might be the best in the game, fight me, but it's clear that this armor is meant as a tool first and fashionable second. Breath of the Wild seems to hold fashion and utility at the same standard. Both are equally important. Perhaps Assassin's Creed is another good example. I only really played Assassin's Creed up to 3, so I can't really speak to the games beyond it, but these early games featured different color outfits for the characters, and I think that worked well enough. However, these colors were almost always purely cosmetic. You didn't need to change this up for any reason, other than just because you wanted to. As a final example of popular games at the time, I'll take Red Dead Redemption 1. This game features loads of unlockable outfits that have tons of different uses. This game, out of the examples that I've given here, seems to do the best. You can unlock or make outfits by doing certain challenges in the game. While each outfit is aesthetically different, they sometimes don't seem to offer that much in the way of use. Like, sure, I could wear this outfit to blend in with this gang, but why would I do that? Why would I care? While yes, these outfits do offer uses, I'll be honest, I just wear whichever one I think looks the coolest, or the one that allows me to cheat in poker. To be clear, I'm not saying all of these games handle armor or outfits poorly, I'm just trying to make a point that Breath of the Wild really just did it better. Each armor set feels both aesthetically unique and purposeful. Even if it's the basic clothes you get at the start, that has symbolic meaning above all else, and I think it works extremely well. When I'm in the Hebrew region, it makes sense that I would want to put on the Rito set. It matches the region's vibe, and it functions well. The Gerudo Vo set offers heat resistance. This is obvious by how little armor there actually is, but it also gives you the bonus of shock resistance when upgraded. Oh, and I suppose that brings me to upgrading armor. Many games have you upgrading your armor or weapons in various ways, but most RPGs tend to have the player upgrade their current set a little before moving on to the next more powerful set of armor. That just makes sense. Breath of the Wild recognizes that the different outfits are tools for different situations and allow you to upgrade armors by visiting Great Fairies. Great Fairies in previous Zelda games healed the player and expanded their magic bar. Fitting with the theme in Breath of the Wild, they function very differently. The game seems to imply that Great Fairies, or at least these fairies, derive their power from rupees. As travelers would come along and bring the rupees, the fairies would in turn offer to upgrade their clothing. Since the calamity that befell Hyrule 100 years ago, travelers have stopped journeying to them and thus they have become weaker. Link, being the kind little boy that he is, decides that he could cough up a few rupees to help out a fairy. 10,000? 10,000 rupees? What the fuck? Yeah, so the game asks the player for a grand total of 15,600 rupees to fully upgrade their armor, on top of other materials you need. Each fairy asks for more rupees to regain their full power. After a fairy is empowered, they can upgrade your armor to a level equivalent to the number of fairies that have been helped out. So if you have 3 fairies open, you get 3 levels of armor upgrade. Not only do you need rupees, but you'll need various bits and baubles that you find throughout the world. Upgrading this stuff can't be done out of thin air, you know. So all that random junk you've been collecting as you travel now has a purpose. Upgrading armor. For most armor sets, the materials needed fit the overall theme of that armor set. The Champion's Tunic, which I read somewhere that was handmade by Zelda herself, is upgraded by using the Silent Princess flower, a flower heavily associated with the princess. Some sets are a bit interesting, such as the Hero of the Wild set requiring the most rare and bizarre critters to upgrade it, like beetles and dragon parts. It's very interesting. Overall though, I do love this system. It can be a bit frustrating that I can't see a list of all the materials I need to upgrade from the armor menu itself, but Nintendo doesn't really seem to care because they didn't change that at all in Tears of the Kingdom, so whatever. When a piece of armor is upgraded, it plays a little cutscene where the fairies do stuff to Link. By the end of it, they drag Link down into the water to do God knows what, but Link seems fine afterwards, so I can't imagine it's too awful. While tedious at times, overall I'd say this system is fun and it gives player more reasons to explore the world. Speaking of reasons to explore the world, let's talk about shrines and dungeons. Hey there, future Garrett here. I somehow completely skipped cooking in this entire script. I think I mentioned it maybe once, and that is simply not enough for this incredible mechanic. So I'm going to interrupt the flow of the video and put it right here after combat, because I think this is the best way to put it. So let's talk a little bit about the culinary arts in Breath of the Wild. Cooking is by far one of the most important aspects of Breath of the Wild, and I think many people take it for granted. It's very easy to forget just how deep and interesting this mechanic is. In terms of utility, the cooking mechanic certainly earns its keep. We can make a variety of meals using specific herbs, vegetables, mushrooms, or meats to just give us an edge in battle or face the bad weather more easily. If you're ever in an area that is too cold to handle, getting your hands on some spicy peppers is extremely easy and effective at making a meal that can help you stay warm in the bitter cold. Conversely, you can also make foods that help you stave off the heat. Foods help with everything from stealth to attack damage. There's no limit. In Master Mode, where every enemy is brought up one tier, having a mighty meal to raise your attack value or a tough meal to raise your defense can make or break some early game or mid game combat encounters. Now, some of you might be thinking, why would I ever make food to stave off the heat if I could just wear armor that does the same thing? Well, cooking allows you to stay warm and wear whatever armor you wish, so if you want to be stylish and warm, you can do that. If you want to wear armor that increases your attack stat, but you're in a cold region, eating a warm meal might help you out there. The inverse is also true as well. You could wear warm armor and eat a mighty meal as well. Some of the best foods in the game are the simplest to make. For example, any hearty meal will completely refill your health and give you bonus hearts. Using a hearty radish or a hearty truffle by itself in a cooking pot will fully heal you, even if it's just one. During the late game, the bonus hearts don't really matter too much, but early and mid game it's pretty useful. And the instant health regeneration is always amazing. Oftentimes, I usually have like a page or so of my cooking inventory just completely filled with hearty meals. However, there are many meals that exist for more fun than utility. Sure, we can always throw out some meat, herbs, and salt into a pot and get some tasty meat, but there's a lot more that we can do here. For example, we can make cake. I've made a monster cake here using some special spice from Kilton or whatever. It doesn't heal much of anything, but it's very fun. We can make omelets, curry rice, rice and eggs, tons of soups, but my absolute favorite meal of all is the creamy heart soup. It's just a soup with a pink pot and a massive heart-shaped radish in there. I love it to death. It's not a particularly useful meal, it's just cute. It doesn't even provide like a hearty effect that you would expect from a hearty radish, but it's just very lovely and nice. It's very Valentine's Day themed and I love that. The art created for each of these meals is also really well done. Even the dubious food is funny. It's so bad that they had to censor it. Cooking encourages experimentation the same way that many other mechanics encourage it. You are basically given free will to make almost any meal you can think of. Think of something you can make at home. There's a good chance you could probably make it in Breath of the Wild. Making a cake is done exactly how you'd expect, though I probably wouldn't boil my cake. You might, I won't judge. Alongside cooking meals, you can also cook tonics. Tonics are very similar to meals in that they can heal or provide certain effects, but, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, they seem to be more potent than meals do. I could be wrong there. Tonics are made from critters and monster parts. For example, the restless cricket can be combined with other monster parts to create a tonic that recovers stamina. The fireproof lizard can be combined with monster parts to create the fireproof tonic. Crazy. The length of time and strength of the tonic is determined by what critters and what monster parts you're using while you cook. This also applies to cooking as well. Using a variety of ingredients can often up the duration and the power of the effect you're looking for. Tonics are primarily used when Link needs a boost in power, but not so much in the hearts. I honestly rarely use them, but they do offer some good use for monster parts. Cooking is yet another mechanic directly tied to exploration. As we explore the various vistas this version of Hyrule has to offer, we find tons of different ingredients that we can experiment with in cooking. There is a very specific kind of joy at finding a new or rare ingredient and using it in cooking. Anything to make exploration more interesting and varied is always a good thing.
This is the nature of change. If you resist, you have dukkha. You have frustration and suffering. But on the other hand, if you understand change, you don't cling to it, and you let it flow, then it's no problem. It becomes positively beautiful. The fact that things are always running out, that things are always disappearing, has some hidden marvel in it.
By far the biggest reason to explore in Breath of the Wild are the shrines. These little guys alongside the 4 divine beasts take place of traditional Zelda dungeons. There are a total of 120 shrines in the game, which is a fairly common number in Nintendo games. Like all the 3D Mario games up to like 3D Land feature like 120 stars or shine sprites. I just find it interesting that Nintendo uses this number a lot. It's very strange. While Breath of the Wild wasn't my first Zelda game, it was the first one that I beat, though I knew it had some big shoes to fill. After beating Ocarina of Time 3D, Skyward Sword HD, and Twilight Princess HD, I can safely say those shoes weren't quite filled. Something that I used to hate in Zelda games was getting lost in the dungeons. I hated the feeling of not knowing what was going on or where to go. Playing through Ocarina of Time for the first time was a fairly long journey for me. I still haven't beaten Master Quest on my 3DS, and I don't really know if I ever will. Skyward Sword HD is by far the most puzzle-focused Zelda game I've played. I know I've said that like 3 times already, but I'll keep saying it. I know I mentioned this earlier, but in addition to its elaborate dungeons, it also features level design that itself feels like dungeons. Most Zelda games give you small areas to roam around in and explore, but Skyward Sword leans into this level design idea hard, treating each area like its own mini sort of dungeon. You'll be solving puzzles to reach each dungeon, and that makes the game feel like a culmination of every 3D Zelda before it. It's very clear that Nintendo had to rethink dungeons in order for them to work in this new open world, and I get that. I think the shrines were made out of necessity. Nintendo needed key teleport areas, and shrines were the perfect way to do it. There are times where a shrine feels a little bit gamified in its location, like you're telling me there's a shrine next to every stable. Bit of a coincidence, no? Other than the few instances I just mentioned, the locations of each shrine are unique and quite fun. While many of them are just nestled in a hillside, others are hidden or locked behind a quest, and that's the kind of thing that I really enjoy. It seems the team took a lot of lessons from Skyward Sword and applied them here. There are dozens of shrine quests in Breath of the Wild, and most feel fun and unique. Some are tedious and annoying, but for the most part I think they offer a nice change of pace to just stumbling into one in the wild. It is genuinely fun to do a lot of these shrine quests. Cass's quests are all perfect. Cass is a beloved character and it's easy to see why. His backstory and his musical riddles are some of the best things to solve in Breath of the Wild. Like one of them is just Link standing on a pedestal naked during a blood moon. It's a bizarre and oddly specific shrine, but it's fun. It's actually one of the most memorable to me because of how funny and honestly kind of difficult it was to pull off. Sure, I could kill a bunch of monsters, run to the pedestal and wait several nights for a blood moon, but that's not really fun. The way I've solved it was just seeing the moon over the horizon and quickly teleporting as close to the pedestal as I could get before it hit midnight. That's goofy shit. That's fun. Even the worst quests, like the fucking Korok one, have some charm to me. It is incredibly charming to see how the Koroks live and do things. They're very childlike and they really keep the Kokiri spirit alive. I love it. Enough beating around the bush though. How are the shrines themselves? Well, 20 of these are tests of strength, and 26 of them are blessing shrines, so you basically just get something and leave. However, the remaining 74 are fun for the most part. Many of these revolve around the abilities that Link gets from his new tool, the Sheikah Slate. Whereas past Zelda games had you obtain items in dungeons to progress, Breath of the Wild gives you all the items you need at the start, and then lets you figure out how to use them in no particular order. Due to the non-linear nature of shrines, they aren't really too difficult to solve. Most of the time when I enter a shrine, I immediately know what the puzzle is and how to solve it. And while you might say, well of course you've played this game over 1200 hours, to that I would say, do you expect me to remember all of these things? I've only done each of these maybe 3 or so times. Once for my first playthrough, again for Master Mode, and again for the footage. I spend most of my time in this game outside the shrines. Even on my original playthrough way back in 2017, some of these were piss easy and obvious, which is strange because most shrines feel a little too short while some feel way too long. However, I will say, the puzzles in most of these shrines are fun and creative, whether it be using magnesis or stasis, or just wind bombing over everything to skip to the end. I found most shrines to be fun to figure out. I'd like to mention a few that stood out to me during the most recent playthrough and talk about why I think they're a worthy replacement for traditional Zelda dungeons. Notice I didn't say perfect. The Shoraha Shrine tasks the player with taking this blue flame to the end of the shrine to unlock the exit. This tests just how well you understand the physics and limitations of the blue flame. By the time you find this shrine, you're very likely to have done either 1 or 2 of the blue flame quests either in Hateno or in Akala. You're very likely to know how this works. You'll need a torch to get from one section to the next, however, you'll also need arrows to shoot the flame from one spot to the next. Now, having to leave the dungeon because I ran out of arrows and travel to some town is a little bit annoying, but honestly it's not that big of a deal, and the puzzles here honestly make up for it. The final test on my first playthrough actually had me stumped for a while. Keep in mind, I'm dumb. You have to light all these torches quickly or else the water will spray out the torches. I, for the life of me when I was 17, could not figure out how to make all of them light at the same time. I honestly had to look it up and figure it out. And when I did look it up, I felt really stupid. Yeah, of course doing a spin attack would work, duh. And I tell you this because sometimes that feeling of being stumped can be frustrating. However, something I have come to love through playing Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess is that I love getting lost and figuring things out myself. I can get real pissy with not knowing what to do in these dungeons, but figuring it out makes that stress and anger worth it in the end. I robbed myself of that satisfaction several times in my first playthrough of Breath of the Wild. Obviously, I'm spoiling the solution here, but if you've never played a Zelda game, I encourage you to trust yourself to solve puzzles. Oftentimes, the solution is the simplest thing that you're just not quite thinking of, unless it's Zelda 1. Fuck that game, it's cryptic as shit. Having that aha moment in a Zelda game is an experience that I have never seen replicated in any other franchise. To be honest with you, on this latest playthrough, I made it a challenge to see how many of these shrines I could just skip through. Many of the shrines can be skipped if you simply wind bomb, and that is maybe one of the funniest things to have ever happened. It's very sandbox-like, and wind bombing is no easy feat. It's very difficult to pull off. However, there is a certain level of satisfaction that comes from wind bombing and cheating certain shrines. I wouldn't recommend you do this on your first playthrough. Try to solve the puzzles the way they're intended. It's more fun that way, but if you're doing repeated playthroughs, honestly, trying to wind bomb your way through, trying to find the different angles to get it just right so you could land right next to the shrine exit is really fun, and it's its own puzzle. I love it. That being said, Breath of the Wild, on my first playthrough or so, didn't really have a lot of these aha moments that I mentioned earlier. As someone who had hardly played Zelda games before, I didn't really think much of it, but playing them again after beating a few more Zelda games made me realize just how special a real dungeon can be. However, you may argue that these shrines aren't meant to be replacements for these dungeons. They're bite-sized little puzzles meant to offer a break of gameplay of exploring the overworld. I agree, you are correct. That is their goal and they accomplish it very well, except for the 46 times that they don't even try. The replacement for the dungeons instead is the Divine Beasts. I'd like to talk about these in depth. Get ready for me to spend the next, 20 minutes or so talking about these and why a mechanical gecko is objectively the worst in terms of all the mechanical animals that exist in Zelda. All jokes aside, I love this, and I won't pretend like I don't find it extremely interesting. From the start, it's apparent that you can do any Divine Beast in any order. However, I think Nintendo had an intended path for players to take, that being Rito, Zora, Goron, and then Gerudo. That's my opinion though, and it's really only based on a few things I've seen, such as the cutscene when you fight Calamity Ganon, and also the difficulty of each one. I think it would be more fun though, to go through the Divine Beasts in the order in which I found them in my original playthrough back in 2017, which would be Vah Ruta, Vah Meadow, Vah Naboris, and finally Vah Rudania. Anyone who knows these beasts well is about to see why I strongly dislike Rudania, and it is particularly based on the fact that I found it last. As I'm talking about the dungeons, it's important that I structure this a little. I will talk about the story leading up to each dungeon in addition to the dungeons themselves. Puzzles, design, the boss fight, overall mechanics, all will be judged here. Nothing is safe from my wrath. I think it's important to bring up the story leading up to each dungeon as it can really set the tone for the dungeon itself. Vah Ruta has a wonderful story leading up to it. We get to meet the incredibly noble and honorable Prince Sidon, heir to the throne of Zora's domain. Sidon is specifically looking for a Hylian, and it just so happens that Link shows up at the right time. He proves himself to be a capable warrior by making his way to Zora's domain in the torrential downpour that is caused by Vah Ruta, which has been taken over by Ganon. Link fights through Lizalfo camps and Wizrobes to reach the stunning Zora's domain, a crystalline city built atop a beautiful lake overshadowed by a stunning cliff. Turns out Sidon needed a Hylian due to Zora's extreme weakness to electricity. Through a genuinely touching sequence of events, we discover that Link was once in something of a romantic relationship with Mipha, Sidon's late sister who tragically lost her life fighting Ganon inside the Divine Beast that now terrorizes the region. My favorite part of this is honestly the slightly racist Zora Muzu, who because of Mipha's demise has grown a hatred for Hylians and Link ever since the calamity occurred 100 years ago. The scenes between Muzu, King Dorephan, and Prince Sidon are some of the best scenes and characters in the game. We watch Muzu going from genuinely despising Hylians to respecting Link and recognizing that he was wrong for his prejudices. I love that. I love this sequence. In fact, several of the older Zora in Zora's domain remember Link and dislike him because of what happened to Mipha. They blame him for her death. Why do they blame him specifically? I don't fucking know. None of them really explain it, but I digress. After a fun trip of fucking up a Lionel, Link gets his hand on some shock arrows, and we're ready to hit down the Divine Beast with Sidon. In a genuinely awesome and fun experience, Link rides on the back of Prince Sidon and shoots these little buttons on Vah Ruta to immobilize it so that we can board it and defeat Ganon and avenge Mipha. I love this sequence. You're riding around this massive machine as it throws ice spikes at you and trying to dodge and weave and move your way around. It's really fun. It feels like the machine is turning on its defense protocol and attacking anything that threatens to take it down. It makes you wonder how many Zora lost their lives because of this thing before Link showed up. Once this sequence is complete, we finally get to board Vah Ruta, and now I think is a good time to discuss the design of the beast. From the outside, it obviously resembles an elephant. The torrential, never-ending rain is coming from its trunk, and I assume from the lake it stands in. This being my first Divine Beast, I'm trying not to be too biased to it, but I do genuinely think it has one of the best designs of the beasts. Something I think each beast does really well is bridge that gap between massive war machine and cool representation of an animal. Vah Ruta really does look like an elephant, but it has bits and pieces that make it clear that it is a massive moving fortress capable of destruction. I love the platforms and the sides and how the legs and the trunk are segmented in this really interesting way. It feels like what a lost technologically advanced society would make. Its design is ancient, but the technology feels futuristic, and I think that design and mix and balance is really cool in all of the Divine Beasts, but Vah Ruta just happens to be the one I'm talking about right now. Something I need to say right off the bat is that the theme of all these dungeons is roughly the same. This brown and black metallic and stone look is applied to all of the beasts. They all look like they were designed by one team of artists, which is intentional, being created by the same Sheikah and not separate tribes. I bring this up because some people give the dungeons of Breath of the Wild shit because they all look the same without realizing that that's the entire point of them. They were designed by the same people. Of course they look the same. They're all the same war machines. It all just makes sense. I understand though how this one theme can get pretty old after a while. On my first playthrough 8 years ago, I didn't really get that critique though. I honestly just really loved it. I felt they were a nice change of pace from Shrines and from the overworld. I wasn't comparing it to Zelda games in the past, I was comparing it to itself in a vacuum, and maybe that gave me a higher opinion of it. However, playing through it again for the purpose of this video, yeah, I think I get it. It does get a little bit bland. Playing through Vah Ruta was fun and I enjoyed it, but as I got into my later dungeons, I felt that fatigue setting in. So that's how I feel about the theme of each of the Divine Beasts. I probably won't be repeating this for each beast, so I figured I should just get it out of the way. All in all, yes, the theme is a little bland, but I think some people who say this miss the point of it. It's supposed to be homogeneous. Now let's get to the good stuff, the reason we love Zelda dungeons and why we love the Zelda series as a whole, the puzzles within the dungeons. Breath of the Wild sets a precedent that carries over to Tears of the Kingdom that I pray dies with these two games. I do not like this style of dungeon, and as I explain it, I hope you'll understand why. Now, I'm not saying all of these dungeons are bad. No, I do think there's a lot of good stuff in these, but I do think there is room for criticism. Let's start with something I love. Each of these beasts focus on the physics of Breath of the Wild in a very natural and fun way. Since we're talking about Vah Ruta, we'll use it as an example. Vah Ruta is kinda a water dungeon. It's certainly not as difficult as something like the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time or even the Zora Waterworks in Twilight Princess, but it is obviously water themed. As Link enters the beast, we hear Mipha's voice calling out for him. Her spirit is still here, unresting within the beast. With Ganon controlling it, it seems her role is unfinished. She advises us to find a control unit so that we can get a map of the Divine Beast and control its movements. To get that map, we need to use Cryonis on a bar door to lift the door with a column of ice. Cryonis is probably the least utilized ability in the game, so it's very nice to see a dungeon that really focuses on it. Some shrines do as well, but I feel like there are far more shrines that find interesting and unique ways to use Magnesis and Stasis than there are ones that use Cryonis. Once we activate the second terminal, we do indeed get that map and controls that Mipha was talking about, and this is where my problems with all of the dungeons begin. As soon as you get access to the map, you are told exactly where to go. There are 5 control units you'll need to activate in order to activate the main control unit that the boss spawns in. First, I like to say that when I did this dungeon back in 2017, I loved it. I loved all of them except the fucking lizard. I was not a fan of that one, and I'm still not, but I was extremely inexperienced in Zelda dungeons, and I get confused sometimes. As you can see from this footage, I had no such trouble. I did not get confused. I was in and out in about half an hour. I made a couple mistakes here and there, but overall, I knew what to do and where to go. Now you might be thinking, well, you have over 1,200 hours in this game. Of course you know where to go. And to that I say, same thing with the shrines. The last time I did these dungeons was in 2018 with my Master Mode playthrough. I did retain a lot of knowledge, however, I feel as though these dungeons are still lacking in terms of puzzles. I was able to figure them out again very quickly. I do enjoy, though, this Divine Beast's movement. You can change the angle of Vah Ruta's trunk, making water splash at different locations in the dungeon. This is utilized in pretty interesting ways. There are 2 large gears that can be powered via water. One is powered by a spout within Vah-Ruta, and the other is controlled by bringing the trunk all the way to the top. This is a fun mechanic. As far as the first Divine Beast goes, it was complicated enough that I had to just adjust it a few times to get it right, to get certain chests and whatnot, but not super complicated that I didn't really understand it. On a 5-star scale, I'd probably give it like 4. It's pretty good, but not enough for me to be like, wow, that's an amazing dungeon. I won't go into detail about each puzzle or secret because, dear God, have you seen the runtime of this video? The script is already like 20 pages. I think the puzzles I've explained thus far do a good enough job of giving you an understanding of this dungeon, and of course, I don't want to spoil everything. After doing God knows what to each of the control units, we head down to the big empty room that is definitely not a boss room, and oh shit, it's a boss room. Water Blight Ganon. Upon my first playthrough, I assumed the Blight Ganons were like minions of the real Ganon that were sent out to take care of the Divine Beasts, but it turns out no. They're actually just pieces of Ganon that have fragmented off to take care of the champions. This is bizarre, and it makes the final boss feel even better, and we'll get to that. As for Mr. Water Ganon here, this guy is a pretty good boss. Like, it's not great. Something I do like about Breath of the Wild is that they definitely deviates from previous Zelda bosses. Nintendo boss fights suffer from the do the random thing 3 times and then he's dead syndrome. In Zelda games specifically, it was like use the new item to open the enemy's weak point, hit it a bunch of times until it recovers, and repeat that 2 more times. This gets old, and it definitely would not fit in this new era of Zelda. I think moving to a more traditional boss fight with hit it until it dies works a lot better for Breath of the Wild. The boss fight is divided up in 2 phases. The floor of the room has just enough water on it that it allows us to use Cryonis while fighting. Sometimes this comes in handy. In the first place, we can make an ice platform to jump off of it to get nice shots at Ganon's face. For this playthrough, I got the Master Sword before entering any Divine Beasts, and holy shit does it make this fight trivial as hell. I think I took this guy down in like 3 minutes, and that's including me fucking up a lot in the second phase. Water Blight Ganon features a long spear that it will throw at you or swing across the floor for a wide attack. This first phase is honestly a bit of a joke. My first time in doing it, I never really considered just making a pillar with Cryonis and then entering bullet time to get a few good shots on it, but this time, well, I got through the first phase incredibly quickly. In the second phase, the water is raised in the floor, forcing Link to swim except in these 4 corners of the room. This phase is, again, extremely simple. So simple that I don't really care to explain it. The footage does that just fine. Upon completing the boss fight, we get a touching reunion with Mipha before she sends us on our way and aims Vah-Ruta at Hyrule Castle, ready for the final showdown. And that's our first Divine Beast. All in all, I'd say it's a pretty decent dungeon. For now, I'm going to be judging all of these in a vacuum, meaning I'm going to do my best to ignore other Zelda games' dungeons and rank them all based on that order. Out of these 4 dungeons, I'd say this is probably my second favorite. And that brings us to the second dungeon that I went through, Vah Meadow. Vah Meadow is a little lackluster when compared to Vah-Ruta. And I mean that in more ways than one. Difficulty, scope, and presentation are all just a little bit lesser here. I think having this horrifying floating war machine hang out above Rito Village is really cool, and it was really cool to see it from a distance and ponder about what it could be, but upon arriving at Rito Village, it's very clear that the devs did not give as much love or care into this storyline as they did like the Zora storyline. While the journey to Zora's domain and the touching cutscenes with Sidon and Mipha are cool, they also do a lot of world building. Zora's domain feels special because it's a place with people who remember Link, and some characters go through their own arcs. That's awesome, and it's done really well. The Rito basically have none of this. You basically talk to the chief of the village, you find Hearth, a Rito warrior who was injured in an attempt to bring down Vah Meadow, find out this Teba guy is who you really want to talk to, speak to his wife, head out to the flight range and impress him with your mediocre archery skills, and then bam, you're off to fight the Divine Beast. That sounds like I'm simplifying things a little, but I'm not. There is no epic build-up to this Divine Beast. It's literally just, hey, can you shoot? Yeah, I guess if you want to take down this thing with me, I'll let you. And then you're off killing Ganon or whatever. I do like, though, that Teba asks Link why he's doing this, and the dialogue options here are great. We have to save Princess Zelda, or to save Rito Village, and then there's just because, which I never noticed or chose until this playthrough, and it made me giggle. It's a very funny piece of dialogue, and it's even funny to imagine that Link, a guy with shoddy memory of who he was at best, waltzed into Rito Village, shoots a bow a few times, and wants to take down a Divine Beast, and the only thing he's willing to explain to anyone is that he's doing it just because. That alone, honestly, makes this little boring storyline worth it to me. We also get a cutscene with the Rito champion Revali, which I think everyone agrees is an ass. Like, I'm not entirely sure what the point of this cutscene is. I get that it's to expand on the personality of the champion, but like, he's just kind of mean. Like, he gets that I'm better than you jealous sidekick archetype. It's very boring. The thing is, Zelda games have done this archetype like so much better in the past. Groose is perhaps one of the best characters in Skyward Sword simply because of his arc. He goes from being a bully to Link to genuinely being a true friend simply because of the things that he's able to do. He recognizes Link as a true warrior while becoming a bit of a hero himself. Revali is just kind of a prick, and then he dies to like the weakest of the Ganons. I will say, approaching Vah Meadow and shooting down his force field with bomb arrows is fun, but it's extremely similar to shooting Vah Ruta's little electrical things. It feels very recycled. Now, let's discuss Vah Meadow's design. Well, it's a giant bird, and that's really cool. All these are cool, honestly, like I said a moment ago, but this one is particularly foreboding as it's just circling above, a literal floating fortress above Rito Village. Me, being a sucker for floating islands, saw this and was super excited. From a distance, I didn't really realize it was a floating war machine, but I thought it was just an island. Approaching Rito Village and seeing that it was in fact a giant war machine made a 17-year-old me shit his pants. With excitement. Jesus, guys, come on. I especially love the little details on this one. The tiny propellers on the underside of the wings are so fun, as if those are going to help keep it afloat. It's a massive stone and metal bird. Those aren't doing shit. But I will say the head and particularly the feet of this have really nice designs as well. Watching them crash down into Rito Village after completing the dungeon was really, really cool. I especially love that the head is like almost like a bridge of a normal ship. You get to enter it and you get to like look out. It's pretty cool. You can see out the eye holes. I really enjoy that. It's not my favorite Divine Beast design, but it's not my least favorite. Inside of Vah Meadow is a different story. This Divine Beast is pretty much laid out in two sections, the left wing and the right wing. Just like every other Divine Beast, we board it and we hear from the champion from 100 years ago, prick, and we need to find these 5 little doodads to activate the big doodad at the end of the dungeon, this time being on the back of Vah Meadow. The controls for Vah Meadow are more visually appealing and fun than Vah Ruta, but like functionally, I'm not as big of a fan. Like, yeah, tilting the entire dungeon is really cool, and I did enjoy that. It's very fun, and they utilize it in some creative ways, but I think I'll always prefer Vah Ruta's execution a little bit more. Some of the puzzles in this dungeon just include tilt the bird so you can jump to the end of the wing and activate the terminal. Like, wow, that very cool, much puzzle, big brain. Others are a bit better. This one has the player rolling a ball down the wing of the bird to blow up a rock wall. We do this by tilting Meadow and then blowing up the bomb at the precise moment. Once that wall is blown up, a metal ball is revealed. Tilting Vah Meadow in the opposite direction brings the ball back to the player to hit a switch and open the door. Pretty cool stuff. The Divine Beast seems to focus a bit more on magnesis than some of the other beasts do, but I don't think there's a central theme to this one like Cryonis was with Vah Ruta. We do some puzzles and then bam, we get another boss fight. I'm not really a fan of Windblight Ganon. This is a very boring boss fight to me, and it wasn't intimidating the first time I fought it, let alone the second time or the third. I actually find it annoying because it does some things to artificially inflate the time of the fight. Like, you can stun this Ganon by shooting it in its eye, just like every other Ganon fight. However, unlike Waterblight Ganon, you can only deal a certain amount of damage before it gets temporary invincibility and then gets up. Waterblight didn't do this, and I'm not exactly sure why. That's why I was able to get through its second phase almost instantly. Instead, I have to sit here and repeat this process while shooting Windblight in the face until it finally gets to its second phase. Its attacks are all very basic in the first phase. It just shoots some lasers at you and moves around. The second phase gets a little bit more interesting, that it throws like tornadoes at you, but that's honestly flying into the air just kind of avoids them, so it's not really all that cool. I don't think I ever saw all of this boss's attacks on this playthrough. In fact, I know I didn't. It's supposed to use these 4 little things to shoot at the player and make sort of like a bullet hell, but I'm just too damn good and I kicked Ganon's teeth in before this could happen. Now, I want to be clear, just because I'm good at this boss fight doesn't mean it's a bad boss fight. It might be weaker and less interesting than some of the others, but it's really not all that bad. It's still better than the old hit it 3 times until it dies style of old Zelda games, but it's certainly not my favorite in this game. Once it's dead, Revali finally admits that Link is strong in his own passive-aggressive way, and we get Revali's weapon, the Great Eagle Bow from the Rito Chief. This bow shoots incredibly fast and fires 3 arrows at once, making it a fantastic weapon for most situations. But that moves us to everyone's favorite, I really mean my favorite, the Gerudo and Vah Naboris. This is easily my favorite Divine Beast both in design and in presentation. Seeing the Gerudo Desert for the first time and seeing this massive behemoth rampaging through the sand was genuinely startling and kind of scary. Talking to several people in Gerudo Town, they're all very worried that it could just walk over and destroy the town at any moment. I especially love getting into Gerudo Town. Finding out that there is supposedly a man who wore women's clothing to sneak into town and then searching around the Karakara Bazaar to find him is really fun. And let's be real, Link is a cute gender-neutral fella in his little Gerudo outfit. We stand a gendered fluid king, let's go. Of course, this also has the very funny effect when talking to male Hylians who are trying to get into Gerudo Town to woo the various women. Many of them will get visibly nervous when talking to Link, mistaking him to be a woman, and it's very funny. The Sand Boots quest in particular is a very funny one. Once inside, we get found out by the young Gerudo chief Riju and her head guard, Baleria. In order to take down Va Naboris, you'll need to first help the Gerudo people to get their stolen heirloom, the Thunder Helm. It was stolen by the Yiga clan, a clan of Ganon worshippers that broke off from the Sheikah a long time ago. This brings us to a stealth mission through the Yiga hideout where we get the Thunder Helm and even better, an absurd amount of bananas. And that brings us to Master Koga, the current leader of the Yiga. This boss is genuinely a lot of fun, and Koga has a ton of personality to him. He's like genuinely fun to like listen to and hang around and fight. And he's around for just the right amount of time. He's goofy, and I think it's a fun change of pace from the other boss fights in the game. Something I always forget to do is take a picture of him, which you should always do with any boss fight, but make sure you do that for your compendium because you won't really get another shot at it. Once we have the Thunder Helm, it's time to take down the Divine Beast. Something that always bugged me during this section was that Link only has memory about Urbosa when Riju wears the Thunder Helmet. Like, surely Link had to see the Thunder Helmet when he got it from Koga. Why didn't that trigger the memory then and there? It's a bit strange, but I feel like I'm nitpicking, so it doesn't really matter. Something I like about Riju is that she's clearly a young woman put into an extremely powerful position, and you can see a lot of character in that. She's stern and noble, but also has a lot of fun and young spirit within. You can see this in her journal and also how she treats wearing the Thunder Helm, noting that it is too big for her head and she's constantly adjusting it on her head. It's very funny. She's definitely above Teba in terms of like side characters, but I'd say she's like below Sidon on my arbitrary tier list of champion descendants. In a really fun sequence, we get to use sand seals to approach Va Naboris. We must stay inside the radius of safety provided by Riju and the Thunder Helm as we shoot the legs of this Divine Beast to stop its rampage. And thus, we're on to our third Divine Beast. I'll spoil it now, but Va Naboris is my favorite of the four. It is by far the most mechanically interesting of the beasts, and it offers the most challenge in terms of puzzles and combat. While it doesn't really look cool, turning the 3 center cylinders does offer a lot of really fun puzzles. Some are as simple as turn it to the right position to open the chest, and others are a bit more complex. Not only do these cylinders turn, but they also carry electricity through them if lined up correctly. For example, you'll need to line up all 3 cylinders on the top to make the electricity go from one side of the Divine Beast all the way over to power some elevators to get at least 2 more terminals. This makes excellent use of magnesis, and you can kind of cheese the puzzle by using a bunch of metal weapons, which is what I did and is very funny. You'll also need the electricity to move Naboris' neck to the upward position as it starts out in a flat position parallel with the main chamber. We have to make sure that shit's perpendicular to get access to the terminal. When I went through Va Naboris back in 2017, it stumbled me a couple times. Even now I had to make some mistakes before I really got the solution, though I definitely didn't feel stumped like I did 8 years ago. This is an excellent dungeon. It requires you have knowledge on electricity, spatial awareness, and even better, good combat skills. The boss fight this time is against Thunderblight Ganon, my favorite of the Ganons that we fight in the Divine Beasts. Like the other Ganons, it mimics the champion from 100 years ago, this time boasting a sword, shield, and insanely fast speed. Its first phase mostly consists of shooting these little lightning balls at the player and then rushing into them really fast, and I think this attack is damn near impossible to avoid. The best thing to do is get hits on this boss is to simply break down its shield. This is honestly counterintuitive from other fights. Most often, the best strategy is to dodge or parry, but this boss fight is much easier if you simply break the shield. This stuns Ganon for a moment and you're able to land some really good hits. The second phase of this adds an attack where Ganon manifests some metal rods that shoot into the ground which conduct lightning. All you have to do is grab one of these rods and put it right back next to Ganon before the lightning strikes it, and then he falls to the ground because he's an idiot. And then you can hit it a bunch of times until it's dead. Defeating Thunderblight Ganon feels like a real accomplishment compared to the others. It's a somewhat challenging fight that takes a bit of getting used to and requires quick movements. And of course we get a little cutscene with Urbosa, and of course we get her weapon, the Scimitar of the Seven and the Radiant Shield. Good weapons, very valuable stuff. This brings us to the final Divine Beast in the base game. Yes, the DLC does add another, Va Rudania. This is by far the weakest of the 4 in every sense. Now, I love lizards as much as the next guy, but the execution of this Divine Beast is incredibly poor, and it's just not a fun one to me. I think this is partially because I did it following Naboris, which I love. Going from that somewhat complex beast to this is a pretty poor experience to say the least. Not to mention the build up to it is just awful. I wouldn't say it's as bad as the Rito storyline, but it's pretty close. We first had to make our way up Death Mountain to Goron City. Along the way we have to make fireproof elixirs so the Link doesn't burn to ash. We can stop by the Goron mining facility to get ourselves some fireproof armor to completely negate the need for potions instantly. What fun! I understand the existence of these potions, and I did use them when fighting the boss of Rudania, but otherwise I have no reason to not wear the fireproof armor. Upon entering Goron City, we are treated to a lovely surprise of massive fiery rocks flying down from the peak of Death Mountain. Turns out, Rudania has been a very naughty boy, has been doing a little bit of terrorism, if you will. The Gorons are a lot of fun. I love the culture of Gorons. They've always been like these big rough and tumble guys, but kind of goofy, and Breath of the Wild is no different. They're just big goofy rock guys that eat rocks and chill out in hot springs. It's fun. Sadly though, this does feel like the region Nintendo gave the least amount of shits about. The story here is so bare bones, and this region is little more than hot rocks and lava with the occasional monster camp around. The story is, get this, the Gorons are trying to find a way to stop Rudania. Shocker, I know. And the Goron Elder is just too old to do anything, but the champion descendant Yunobo is a goofy good-for-nothing dork that seems to have gotten lost in a mine somewhere. So Link helps him out of the mine, and then bam, we're making our way up to Death Mountain to fight Rudania. We go through the sequence where we have to shoot Yunobo at some rocks via these cannons, and then also dodge guardians that act as sort of little drones for Rudania to target us. This is kind of fun, and I like how it uses magnesis, but it doesn't really work. The whole point of this story is trying to show how Yunobo goes from a weak, cowardly Goron to a strong and brave warrior, and it just really doesn't work. We spend like 5 minutes with the character. It's immediately obvious what his archetype is, and we learn next to nothing about him except that he's a descendant of Daruk, the previous champion. I know I really haven't touched on the story much, but we'll get there. I honestly couldn't give a shit less about this guy, and I think I speak for most fans of this game when I say that Yunobo is genuinely the weakest character in the game. It feels like they spent half an hour coming up with a story with him, couldn't think of anything better, and said, fuck it, that'll do, and went on about their business. And I know some people say that story isn't the focus of the game, and to be honest, I'm really not asking for much. Saiden's storyline isn't the most impactful stuff out there, but it's leagues better than the 5 minutes of fame Yunobo gets, or 7 minutes that Teba gets. I don't want to give the impression that I'm expecting an amazing story out of Breath of the Wild. I honestly was not. I had zero expectations going into this game because I really didn't know Zelda games that well. And blah blah blah, fake fan accusations coming, blah whatever. I really had no expectation with Sidon's story or Riju's story, but I just happened to like those storylines better. Yunobo just made me want to hate myself. It was so boring. I'm critiquing this a lot, but I do want to make clear that I am a fan of the story of the game overall, and I'll touch on that more when we actually cover the story later. For now, let's talk about Vah Rudania. This one actually terrified me on my first playthrough. For much of my time exploring Hyrule, I never really paid attention to Death Mountain, like, oh yeah, cool, big tall mountain, whatever. I didn't really care to look at it that much, or when I did, I didn't really see anything interesting. I do recall, though, seeing something moving on Death Mountain and then freaking out. I remember my heart sinking with fear, like, what is that giant thing moving across Death Mountain? How could it be so large that I can see it from this far away? In the end, it was, another divine beast, but that fear was very real, and it startled me because something was off. I'd spent the entire playthrough just walking around, not thinking much about Death Mountain, and then bam, there's this huge thing just walking across it. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's kind of like being in your bedroom, and then one day something has been moved, and you're not quite sure what, and it just feels off. That's kind of how I felt about Rudania. Seeing it up close, it's a lot less terrifying and more reptilian, shocker. I like its design, of course, I like all the dungeons, but this one does feel the weakest to me. I do love that once the dungeon is complete, the head splits open to a bunch of pieces when Rudania takes aim at the castle. That is really cool and unexpected, and I really enjoy that design. I also love how it moves around the mountain. Watching its legs step around is really cool. I love that about all the divine beasts. The way they move and interact with the world is sublime. Beyond this, though, I don't have much that I can say about it that I wouldn't apply to all the other divine beasts in terms of exterior design. Interior design, on the other hand, boy howdy do I have some choice words. Once we finally reach Rudania with Yunobo, he nopes the fuck out of there and leaves us to fight Ganon inside. Shocker. We are once again greeted to the voice of a champion, this time Daruk. I think Daruk actually might be my favorite champion. He's just a big, goofy, fun guy. He just eats rocks with Link. That's cool. It's funny. Rudania itself, though, is pretty underwhelming. Its central mechanic is by far the weakest of the 4 divine beasts. You can turn Rudania 90 degrees either flat or on its side. That's it. That's the big gimmick this time. You go from a semi-complicated cylinders of Von Naboris to the pressing A once and it's good to go. It was a pretty massive letdown. I remember this being the divine beast I wanted to just rush through as fast as possible. This one was just not fun to me. And wouldn't you know it, on this most recent playthrough, it still was not fun to me. I got through this Divine Beast way faster than any of the others. This was in part due to me not wanting to be in there because of how boring the puzzles are. It starts off with this section where it's completely dark, and to be honest, I like this section. It's kind of neat. You have to take the blue flame around until you can access another terminal of the dungeon, and in doing so, you light up the whole place. That's pretty neat, but it's way too short. It would have been cooler to me if hitting each terminal would have lit up that section of the Divine Beasts, instead of just lighting up the whole thing all at once. And yes, I am aware that one of the terminals is outside, but there's no reason that one couldn't be done last, or whatever. The mechanic of moving the Divine Beast 90 degrees is only really interesting exactly one time, when you have to move this ball from the outside of the beast to the inside by flipping it. And you also have to move a metal box over these flamethrowers and turn the beast. Very interesting. I'm being sarcastic. Not much here to say other than this one's really boring to me. The boss fight isn't much better, though I actually got stumped a little bit on the second phase until I remember this is a boss fight in the Goron region. In almost every boss fight involving Elden or Death Mountain, you have to throw bombs into something while it sucks in a bunch of air. This is very common in the Zelda series, and while Fireblight Ganon was sucking up air in his second phase, it hit me. I need to throw a bomb at the little bitch. At that point, he was cooked. Get it? Because it's hot, and, you know, it's Death Mountain. Like, that's what the kids say. Get it? Fuck, I'm old. I skipped over Fireblight Ganon's first phase in this discussion because it was just boring. We then have a fairly touching reunion with Daruk, followed by Yunobo having quite the story to tell when he returns to Goron City, and of course we are given Daruk's weapon of choice, the Boulder Breaker. I think other than the Royal Guard weapons, it might be the single strongest weapon in the game, obviously tied with the upgraded Master Sword. It's just a massive hammer with a lot of power and a lot of durability. Overall, the base game's dungeons were serviceable. I think they are more or less slightly larger than shrines with a bit more going on. They cover a few concepts rather than just one, and that's nice. However, I do see why so many people don't like these things. They look almost identical to the shrines, and they all look the same as each other, and I can see how that takes away from the grand experience that it could have been. I agree with others when they say that they could have been a bit more varied, but if I may, these are supposed to look the same. As I said earlier, it's all cohesive with ancient Sheikah technology. I think players miss that point. The entire point of this design is to be similar to the other Sheikah stuff. They're meant to stand out against the beautiful nature of Hyrule. I definitely understand the sentiment that led people to want more varied dungeon designs, and it's obvious that Nintendo heard that criticism when making Tears of the Kingdom, but I have some choice words for that game's dungeons. However, it would be kind of dishonest of me to judge these dungeons in a vacuum. This is a Zelda game, after all. I understand that this game is supposed to break the conventions of Zelda, but I think breaking conventions isn't inherently good or bad. It just is. And that fact shouldn't cloud your judgment. These games do not exist in vacuums. Frankly, Breath of the Wild has a reputation to uphold. Zelda games are known for their world-building storytelling and, of course, dungeons. Hell, Twilight Princess bathes in dungeons. Skyward Sword takes it to the logical extreme. When compared to dungeons in other Zelda games, these are kinda bad. Naboris is the only one that they could go toe-to-toe with some of the classics. Like, yeah, I'd probably rate Naboris above the Deku Tree from Ocarina of Time, sure. But am I gonna rate it above the City in the Sky from Twilight Princess? Fuck no. Skyward Sword, despite how divisive it was, is very impressive in terms of its dungeons. Even the game's opening dungeon was very impressive to me. I downloaded Skyward Sword off the Wii U eShop before the HD version was announced, and I literally got stumped in the first dungeon. But that also might be because I was really annoyed at the controls, so that might not just be the dungeon. However, the HD version came out and fixed a lot of those problems I was having, and I think the reception of this game has only gotten better with the HD remaster. Point is, I like getting lost and confused in Zelda games. The Water Temple is fun. It makes my brain hurt, okay? Go watch Terminal Montage's Water Temple video if you want a comedic idea of how complicated that dungeon is. It's very funny. And the thing is, you can't really call me a Zelda purist or one of the old fans who hates the new stuff because, like, I'm not. Like I said before, Breath of the Wild is the first Zelda game I really sank my teeth into. It's not like I started with Ocarina of Time and then went into Breath of the Wild expecting a traditional 3D Zelda. I had no expectations for what a Zelda dungeon was supposed to be like. These dungeons clearly left something to be desired for a lot of players. While I'd say like 3 out of the 4 Divine Beasts are, pretty good, I totally understand where players are coming from. And thank God Tears of the Kingdom made such better dungeons, right? Right? And this finally brings me to exploration. What is there to do between the big dungeons?
We thought of life by analogy with a journey, with a pilgrimage which had a serious purpose at the end. And the thing was to get to that end. Success, or whatever it is, or maybe even heaven after you're dead. but we missed the point the whole way along. It was a musical thing, and you were supposed to sing or to dance while the music was being played.
Where do I even begin with this section? From the beginning of the game, you are begged to explore every inch of the Great Plateau. The game largely leaves you to your own devices. You're tasked with heading to the 4 shrines in no particular order, and along the way you'll come into some various locales that are meant to teach the players about some new mechanic or how some monsters work. There's even some Koroks you can find on the plateau as well to expand your inventory. You are given so little direction here, and you're given more and more tools to interact with the world that you're in. Once you complete the Magnesis Shrine, you can use Magnesis on a small pond directly next to the shrine to fiddle around with it. There's even a mud puddle nearby that you can use to tinker with Cryonis or, use Magnesis to get to some chests. The point is, this tutorial area sets up a lot and is a part of the reason I think so many people fell in love with this game. Many open world games struggle narratively because there is a disconnect from what the in-universe character wants to do and what the players want to do. Breath of the Wild fixes this in a pretty clever way that, funny enough, Tears of the Kingdom later fails at. We find out that this old dork we've been hanging out with is actually the spirit of King Bosphoramos Hyrule, the final king of Hyrule. Hell of a name, by the way. I dig it. He warns Link that it would be reckless to head directly to the castle. Link should build himself up after his long slumber and perhaps regain his memories. Part of that journey of rebuilding himself would no doubt be helping the people of Hyrule. So while you're out and about helping people or hunting whatever it may be, none of it really feels like something that Link wouldn't do or disconnected from the lore, if that makes any sense. There is no sense of urgency to what Link must do. Sure, Ganon will regain his power, but it is vital that Link regain his strength before trying to take on Ganon. This means that whether I am sledding or wind bombing my way across Hyrule, I can truly feel immersed because I feel no pressure to do anything in particular except for the things that I want to do. So there's an in-universe explanation for why Link explores so much and does so many things that would otherwise seem useless in any other game. But what does that exploration actually look like? What does it mean to explore Hyrule? To put it simply, it really is about the journey rather than the destination. For example, many players will go from the Great Plateau to Kakariko Village, but along the way the game intentionally puts lots of little useful spots to keep the player interested. We'll start with the ruins that are just littered outside of the Great Plateau. These are covered in moblins, and if you have the DLC, there's a couple books here that can tell you how to find some cool stuff. The plateau, contrastly, only ever featured bokoblins. Players are faced with a larger, more challenging foe with considerably more health than the bokoblins they've been getting used to. This presents players with an opportunity to flex their combat skills or put them in their place depending on their skill level. Depending on the time of day, it can teach players about stealth. If it's night, the moblins will sleep, making it easier for players to slink by undetected. Beyond these ruins, we get what very well could be the player's first NPC outside of the king. Brigo is a man who guards this bridge. Why does he do it? To protect travelers and to make sure that it doesn't get hijacked by monsters. He can give us some tips about the area and even tell us about some guardians. He'll even encourage the player not to jump off the bridge if he sees them standing on the edge. He's a very sweet character. Moving further, we can find a couple of new types of Korok seeds in various monster camps and another tower expanding the player's map. And of course, we can find a few more shrines along the way as well as a stable. To be fair, this is an early game route that is intentionally set up to house many things to teach a player about the world, but from this path, there are many other paths that can be taken. Instead of going straight to Kakariko Village through Dueling Peaks, players can go through Hyrule Field and enter the village from the north, finding a stable or two along the way as well as a few shrines and ruins and maybe even a guardian. There is rarely just one way to get to a location, and there's rarely a most efficient path too. This, in part, is because what we define as most efficient depends entirely on what we find fulfilling. While I might love going from major point to major point, perhaps you love taking one wrong turn and ending up in a completely different area and discovering new things. There's all kinds of different examples. As long as you find what you do to be valuable, then it's worth the journey. This means that any location is really just a location. It's not a point B to your point A, it's just a thing you can go to. Even in this latest playthrough, I've found countless things along hidden paths or odd locations that I've never seen in my 8 years of playing the game. I get just as much joy out of finding small hidden things as I did back then. I really do think there is beauty all throughout this world. This is one of the most living worlds I've ever seen. Animals eat, sleep, yawn, interact with each other and the world at large. Even the tiniest of insects have such interesting movements, and it's obvious that so much care was put into this world. The best way to experience said care is through the compendium. The compendium is a massive list of almost everything in the game. Every monster, every weapon, every creature, every tiny mushroom, and even chests and ore deposits are all listed in this compendium. This is a blast to fill out. It's one of those things that I just love in almost any game that has something like it. It encourages the player to seek out new things and explore the world to get ever closer to filling out that compendium. It is immensely satisfying to fill it out bit by bit. Sure, it's a lot of fun to take pictures of the boss fights and all the cool things, but sometimes just observing the animals or the monsters and seeing how they interact with the world can be even more rewarding. Something I found while getting footage was this bokoblin in Gerudo Heights. It's holding a meteor rod staring at a massive block of ice. I decided I was also curious about what might be inside this block of ice, so I kept my distance and shot the ice with a fire arrow. This revealed another bokoblin. Afterward, they both just sat there and talked with each other. I especially love that the one who wasn't frozen talked first, almost as if it was telling its friend what it missed while it was frozen in ice, or how much it missed it. Naturally, I chose to spare these two. There's no reason to senselessly murder these two when they're just chilling up here. It's the little things like this that make the world feel alive. It's not just the animations that the creatures do, it's not just the music or the sounds coming together, it's the care put into every aspect of this world. A developer came up with this goofy idea, and it was liked so much that it got put into the game. This is a meaningless, very well hidden secret that has no effect on anything except for, well, for us. This is meant for us to enjoy. I can imagine being the person who came up with this little interaction, going home to tell their partner or their family about what the little goofy thing that they added to the game is, you know? But perhaps more interestingly, maybe the person whose idea this was saw videos of it online and saw people praising this game when it came out and their attention to detail. I suppose I'm one of those people. The fact that I am still finding small, interesting details in this world 8 years later should say a lot about it. But if we take a moment to look at the macro, that is to say that we look at the world as a whole and not just the individual parts, we find that this world is an epilogue of a great tragedy. Ruins are littered all across Hyrule. Sure, there are some stone ruins around Hyrule Field, but we can find entire villages burned to the ground. The Hebra village is a ruin that players will likely run into getting to the Hebra stable. There is no sign of human life here. After 100 years, monsters have taken shelter in the remains of what once was people's lives. These streets, these houses, these were people's friends, memories, and workplaces. Dozens of people likely lived here, and all that remains of them are ruins of the places that they once called home. I suppose it's entirely possible that some of the people who were here made shelter in the Hebra stable and maybe their descendants live here, but I feel like the odds of that are incredibly slim. There are countless places like this across Hyrule, places that aren't just ancient ruins, but 100-year-old homes of people who were tragically killed in the Great Calamity. Ganon and the Guardians massacred this land. There's a line that King Rome says when he reveals his identity to Link, and it really hits home for me. I think I'll let him say it.
I was King Rome Bosphoramos Hyrule. I was the last leader of Hyrule, a kingdom which no longer exists.
To me, these are the words of a broken man. His spirit has remained here on this plateau, waiting for Link to awaken. This man has lost everything. He lost the people he swore to protect. He failed to stop Ganon, and worst of all, he lost his daughter. We'll get into this more when we cover the story, but Rome genuinely feels like he's had a lot of time to regret and think about how he treated his daughter leading up to the calamity. These are the words of a man who has never truly felt peace. And I think this sets up this entire game. This little isolated plateau is a reflection of the entire world, a rotting snapshot of what once was. I feel this particularly hard when I visit Castletown. Hundreds of people lived here. We've seen what a busy Castletown looks like in Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time, and it's a place bustling with life and noise. Now, it's silent, except only the Guardians that roam its streets. The same Guardians, mind you, that destroyed everything here a century ago. This is depressing. To be honest, I don't think I felt how depressing this was until I played Twilight Princess. That game does such a good job of bringing Castletown to life that it makes this Castletown even more dreadful and sad. Children would run these streets playing games, parties, pubs, festivals, traditions, all lost to this great calamity. It's very easy for us as gamers to think of ourselves as the hero and think of things from that perspective, but can we just talk about what it would be like to be a normal person who lived through this? The fact that Link, even after regaining his memories, can walk through the streets of Hyrule Castletown, streets that I have no doubt he knows well, and not break down crying says a lot about his character, and it's incredible. Above all though, Breath of the Wild is a game about change. This world is changing. Many of the people that dot the land of Hyrule are unconcerned with Calamity Ganon's revival, except for the few who are still alive to remember it. Everyone else has their own problems and worries to carry about. As far as they know, Calamity Ganon is a historical event. It's over. The past is gone and it will never return. In the same way that the wind never hits the same blade of grass in the exact same way, or how water molecules that make up the river never quite touch the same rock in the same way, so too does the Kingdom of Hyrule flow in one direction with time. Something I really enjoy is the fact that nobody is actively trying to rebuild Hyrule. No one is going around to these ruins and trying to rebuild them or refortify them. This changes in Tears of the Kingdom, of course, with the return of Princess Zelda, but without her, Hyrule is as good as gone. Instead, new things are coming up, and people of Hyrule have chosen to leave the ruins to rest, perhaps as a tribute to the many people who lost their lives. I think it's very common for many people today want to go back. There's a big push to return to the way things used to be, a heavy resistance to change. Pardon the politics, but the conservative movement in the United States is very much reminiscent of this. Make America great again, as though something happened to make this country not so great anymore. Whatever you believe, this cultural movement exists and there's no denying that. This is futile though, isn't it? You're not going to return to the way things used to be. You have to push forward. As much as I miss being a 12-year-old kid and playing Super Mario Bros. Wii, I can never return to that. We can't return to whatever arbitrary picture-perfect world we have in our heads because that's not how time works. Trying to go back or trying to fit the world to be what it was back then, you're fighting the river of time. It's much harder to swim upstream than it is to surrender yourself to the waves. If we apply this logic to Breath of the Wild, you'll find that all of Hyrule has done a remarkable job of moving on, and those who haven't moved on are typically depicted in a negative light. Muzu is a perfect example of this. Being untrusting of the river and fearing the river is what causes people to resist. But if you instead allow yourself to flow, you'll find that the water is quite beautiful, and it's the people who have mastered the flow of the river who cast a sail and use the river to move forward. If you go into Breath of the Wild with no expectations and allow yourself to just become fully immersed in this world, you'll find that the experience is extremely meditative. As I'm writing this, I am standing on a cliff overlooking Hyrule Field from the west. I'm just letting time pass, and that's a beautiful thing. To bring this back to a more gaming-focused retrospective, I'm sorry for the little philosophy talk, I'd like to talk about some of the areas or things that I've just found interesting as I journey across Hyrule. These are things that have piqued my interest or stood out to me as little points of interest or unassuming small details. I encourage you to come up with your own lists of neat places and put them in the comments. It's a lot of fun. Eventide Island is one of the best examples of exploration this game has to offer. It's very likely that players will head to Hateno Village very early on in their playthrough. From here, it's very likely that they'll go to the southeastern coast of Hyrule where they'll see a small island off in the distance. Well, there has to be something cool on that island. How could there not be? However, most players won't really have enough stamina or maybe even the knowledge of how to get over to that island. They might try to use Cryonis to get over the massive stretch, but sometimes Lizalfos and Octoroks are kind of an ass. They're more likely to forget about the island for a long time and return to it much later. Regardless of when it is found, upon reaching the island, the player is stripped away of everything in their inventory. All of the weapons, bows, food, materials, and armors you can think of are gone. A Sheikah monk challenges you to place 3 balls into 3 pedestals without having any of your gear. And this is what we call subverting expectations. We as players get used to always having our tools with us. We grow comfortable with what we have. Our armor keeps us safe. Our tools give us strength. But what happens if the developers take that away? Well, it exposes us and it tests our resolve. Have we been using these tools as a crutch to get by, or are we truly capable without our tools? Or do you just say fuck it and throw all your shit in the island before you actually touch foot of the island, thereby having all of your tools when you actually get on the island and kind of cheating the task? That's the freedom this game offers. You can choose to take this challenge on as the developers intended, or you can just do it your own way. Most of the fun is finding your own ways to explore and do things anyway. I feel that this freedom is at its peak when we're doing side quests. I know plenty of people have issues with side quests in this game, but I am certainly not one of them. Some of these quests can be chalked up to give me X amount of random item because I need it for stuff, but there are several that stand out to me as interesting or fun. The Weapon Connoisseur is probably one of my favorite early game side quests. A young boy named Ned lives in Hateno Village and wants to see all the weapons his grandfather told him about or wrote about. I don't remember which. Someone tell me if he wrote it or told it. Don't care. This quest sees the player traveling across Hyrule to collect various weapons to show to Neb and fulfill his grandfather's dreams. This starts with a Traveler's Sword. It's a weapon that almost every player will have at the early start of the game and is easily found around the Great Plateau. This ramps up pretty quickly with the next weapon being the Fire Rod. This sets up the expectation that you're not just looking for basic swords, you're looking for a wide array of weapons to show this kid. This is really fun. It's the kind of quest that you're rarely actively thinking about, but rather you see a weapon and it clicks in your mind. Oh yeah, I need to show this to Neb, because it just hits you. Like for example, I completely forgot about this quest until I saw a duplex bow and I was like, oh, yeah, I need to get that back to him. The reason I like this one so much is because it's unique from some of the other give me 50 doubloons and I'll give you a meal copy and paste quest, which Tears of the Kingdom does a lot of. It also sees the player actively seeking out interesting and unique weapons that they otherwise may not think about. I do wish, though, to be honest with you, that the list was somewhat randomized. I definitely think the Traveler's Sword should be first, but this quest could benefit from some randomness that would add to the unique experience of each player. Imagine that you show Neb the Traveler's Sword and then the game picks from a list of 3 weapons to choose as the next one. This means that 3 players would have 3 different weapons to show to Neb, and that could just add a little bit more depth to the quest and more of a story to tell to each other. Of course, the best quest in the game is undoubtedly Tarrytown. I'm going to assume that everyone who has watched the video has a good understanding of what this quest is, but just in case, here's a quick reminder. Upon arriving in Hateno Village, Link can find an old abandoned house on the south side of town, and 3 construction workers in the process of tearing it down. Bolson, the head of the company, can be stopped by Link, who can then buy the house for 3,000 rubies and 30 bundles of wood. Upon getting the house, Bolson kind of hangs out for a bit, and Hudson decides to move on to the Akala region to form his own construction company. If you head to the Akala region and find Hudson, you can help him build a whole new town by giving him dozens of bundles of wood. It's very tedious, yes, but also it's one of the best quests in the game because we get to not only help build a new settlement in Hyrule, but also populate it as well. Once the town is built, Link is tasked with finding people to move in. Every resident must have a name ending in Sun, per company policy. It's very fun, and it sees the player going back to the various settlements to find people to move into this new town. The reason you can do so many interesting and fun side quests is because Breath of the Wild gives you a true sense of freedom. If I really wanted to, I could get as many expensive gems as I can as soon as I leave the Great Plateau and try to do Tarrytown as fast as possible. There's nothing stopping me from doing that besides inconvenience maybe, but that's a bit subjective. If you really want to, you can go straight to Hyrule Castle and find recipe books needed to complete the Royal Recipe side quest just for fun. A lot of these quests have you visiting interesting parts of the world or looking out for the finer details, but above all, you could do it at any time. This is what I think Breath of the Wild does right compared to other open world games that precede it. Take for example a game like Skyrim. Now, I love Skyrim, I've spent a lot of time in this world, but I will not shy away from critiquing it. I played it a lot as a kid, but as I've gotten older, the cracks in its design begin to show more and more. Skyrim likes to set itself up as a pretty big open world where you can truly do whatever you want. This world is teeming with life and has many mysteries, and in many ways I would say that it accomplishes that goal of being a true open world experience. However, there's many things you can't do without taking part in the main story. If you choose to never approach the Jarl of Winterhold about the dragon attack at Helgen, never go to Bleak Falls of Barrow, and never learn that you're a Dragonborn, a legendary hero born with the blood of immortal dragons, then several things will not occur in your playthrough. Firstly, dragons will never spawn. So long as you do not do these quests, the looming threat of dragons taking over and destroying the world just never happens. This blocks off access to top tier armors and weapons. On top of this, you'll never be able to learn how to shout. Shouting is essentially big magic, for lack of a better term. Players use shouts for all sorts of things. Shouting can topple enemies, it can give you super speed, it can make you immortal for a short period of time, hell, it could even change the damn weather. If you choose to ignore the story, you will never have access to these things, and there are at least a few dungeons where shouting is a requirement to proceed. There are several locations that are tied to the main story quest that you cannot enter without doing it. This is where Skyrim begins to fail that idea of a truly open world. While there's a lot you can do in Skyrim, it is undeniable that it locks away content behind its main story. And I could understand if it was some things like, oh, you can't do this dungeon here or there, but like, it's a mechanic as big as shouting. It's one of the biggest things in Skyrim. Breath of the Wild, beyond its tutorial, does not do this. There is nothing you can't do by ignoring the story. You don't ever have to visit Impa. You can still find your way to Hateno and get the camera room without ever speaking to Impa first. Hell, you can go up to Robbie in Akala at first if you really wanted to. As soon as you step off that plateau, You are free to do whatever you want. The game holds nothing back. If you want to ignore the main story entirely, you have the option to do so. If you want to go straight into the Divine Beasts and ignore all the shrines, you're free to do so. If you want to get as many hearts as possible before doing any of the Divine Beasts, so that you have the Master Sword as soon as possible, you're free to do so. That isn't to say that Breath of the Wild is the first game to do open worlds right. I'm certainly not making that claim, but it is the first one in a long time. The only other game I can think of, and maybe some others have already thought of it, is Fallout New Vegas, which personally, I haven't played it, but I trust H-Bomber Guy's opinion enough, and that game came out in 2010. Say what you will about that opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. Finally, the Hero of the Wild set is probably one of my favorite Link outfits, just behind Skyward Sword Link and of course the Champion's Tunic. As a reward for completing all 120 shrines Breath of the Wild, the player is given this classic green tunic that resembles the tunic Link wears in the original Legend of Zelda. I think this really drives home how this game is a reimagining of that original Zelda idea, a truly open game. Lacking the traditional green tunic through the whole game symbolizes the break from the 3D Zelda experience, but at the end of it all, when you've explored so much of this world, you are rewarded with an outfit that symbolizes the original Zelda game, and that is really awesome because it shows that we've come home, we've tied everything together, and I think that's just one of the best rewards for exploration in any game. However, as a consequence of this sheer freedom, there is something lost in the way of story. I do think Breath of the Wild's story is better than its sequel, an opinion I did not always hold, but after playing other 3D Zelda games, I get it. I understand why so many people were upset at this game. So let's jump ship and delve into Breath of the Wild's story. Hey there, Future Garrett again. I realize that I barely mentioned Koroks in this whole exploration section, and that feels pretty silly of me. Koroks are of course the spirit children that reside all throughout Hyrule, but their true home is the Lost Woods under the protection of the Deku Tree. These little guys can be found quite literally everywhere. There are a total of 900 Koroks in the game. In reality, you only need to find about 440-ish to completely expand your inventory. When you find a Korok, it gives you a little golden seed that is definitely poop. These seeds can be traded with a fellow named Hestu, another resident of the Lost Woods. Hestu loves to play his maracas, and you can help him make wonderful music by giving him seeds so he can put them inside the maracas. Doing so gives him the magical power to expand your inventory for some reason. The genius in Koroks is that they not only provide something useful to the player, but something truly fun and unique. Not only can you find Koroks almost everywhere, as I stated before, but you can find them in a variety of ways. Sometimes they're just chilling up high somewhere. Other times they're expecting you to solve a small puzzle. Whether it be solving a little puzzle with magnesis or following a random flower around, getting Koroks is always a joy, and it always offers a bite-sized reward for your exploration. Oftentimes, these little guys are just placed off the main paths between points of interest. They encourage the player to stop, get off the road they are on, and go ventured into the wilderness, if only for a brief moment. I think Koroks perfectly encapsulate what Breath of the Wild is trying to do with its world. It's trying to give you a sandbox that you can freely explore and do anything in. Koroks are just another reason to play with that sandbox. You can learn about certain mechanics using Koroks, you can learn about magnesis, you can learn about stasis. There are so many different ways that you can find Koroks that it's genuinely fun and truly unique. I don't think I've ever seen another video game do anything like Koroks. Getting all 900 Koroks grants you a little golden turd, which I think is incredibly funny. It's pretty obvious that the developers never intended or cared if people got all 900 of these things, so they just threw this in as a joke. I've seen people online claim that this is mean to completionists and that it spits in the face of what these players are trying to do, but to be honest, I don't really care. If you're treating Breath of the Wild as a checklist for you to clear off, then you're playing the game for the wrong reason. If you're playing Breath of the Wild with the expectation that it's going to have an amazing interactive narrative, you're also playing it for the wrong reasons. Was that a good transition? I tried. Anyway, here's part 7.
No one imagines that a symphony is supposed to improve in quality as it goes along, or that the whole object of playing it is to reach the finale. The point of music is discovered in every moment of playing and listening to it.
A bit of a disclaimer here, I'm going to be focusing on the story told in the base game's cutscenes and the Champion's Ballad DLC's cutscenes as well. Many people think of a story in a video game as cutscenes and the overarching narrative happening throughout the game, but I think Breath of the Wild tells its story in a very different way. Breath of the Wild lets you tell that story. It lets you create stories of what the hero of Hyrule does following his long slumber. Once the intro is done, the game lets you make those memories and narratives. This is a very unorthodox way of telling a story, and I think it's one that doesn't hit home for a lot of people. Many people want stories to be something that they are told, not something they are telling. If I play a game that features a story, I expect to have a part in that story, sure, but I also expect there to be a cohesive narrative written by the devs that I get to take part in. Other RPG games like the Xenoblade series or Final Fantasy are excellent examples of narrative-driven adventures. As I play Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I am playing it mainly for that story and the admittedly unorthodox combat system, and yes, that game's story is cringe at times, particularly within the first few chapters. Blushy Crushy is the single worst thing I've ever had to read in a video game. The narrative really picks up as the game goes on, and we as players are treated to a rich and frankly depressing story in my opinion. Breath of the Wild's story, as I briefly touched on a moment ago, is also very depressing, but more so from a retrospective point of view. We don't really see the events of the Great Calamity that took place 100 years before Breath of the Wild. We see snippets of it via cutscenes and events leading up to it, but we never really get to be in the action of it. Because of this, the story feels very distant. It's obvious that the push for player freedom had to come at the cost of an epic story. And I don't know if I can say I prefer or dislike this. I think it's just different. I love previous Zelda games because of their stories and dungeons, but I love Breath of the Wild for its world and details. In terms of the story the game provides, I think it does some things very right and some things very wrong. Breath of the Wild does a lot of hinting at things. It gestures toward powerful story beats but rarely shows them to us. We get to see the beasts that defeated the 4 champions 100 years ago, but we don't get to see their downfall directly. We get to see bits of Link and Zelda's relationship forming, but never enough detail to truly feel satisfying. I think the biggest problem here is that Link is silent. Link does speak, in case you didn't know. Every time we choose a dialogue option, that is Link talking, not just some generic game mechanic. The Japanese version of the game has some massive differences in terms of its quest log. The quest log in the American version is written in the second person, or third, I can't remember which, while in the Japanese version it's written in first person, as though it's Link's journal. The Japanese players get a much more personal look at who Link is, and I think it's a shame that this was changed when translated over to the States. In previous Zelda games, it made sense for Link to be silent. Link, of course, is the link between us, the player, and the game, hence the name Link. In previous Zelda games, we were free to name this Link whatever we wanted, whether it be Fart, Lunk, or some other name. We were able to give him a personality based on what we desired. In Breath of the Wild, that option is simply not here. We don't get to put our identities into this Link. He is a character this time around. He is Link, that is his literal name. As such, the silent protagonist shtick doesn't really work as well. If he's a malleable character that we could go shape to our liking, the silent protagonist thing would work. It makes sense, but he's not. He is a knight tasked with guarding and protecting the Princess of Hyrule, chosen by the Master Sword, and we hear nothing out of him during any of these cutscenes. The game's explanation for this is that with the burden of protecting and saving the Kingdom of Hyrule, Link feels it best to say very little. But come on, don't lie. When you beat Breath of the Wild and got to this final cutscene where Zelda asks if Link remembers her, and Link just says nothing, you also got a little annoyed. Like, hell, they could have put a nod in there, to be honest with you. For lack of a better term, it's kind of cringy. It doesn't fit. It feels like an attempt to meet in the middle, somewhere between a full character with his own emotions and feelings and the blank slate that we, the players, get to mold. To that end, I think it fails to do either thing particularly well. There are other games that have done this silent protagonist thing, and it doesn't work for them in their own kind of narrative because the character has a personality, a name, and a life of their own. Totally whack and unrelated example, but Call of Duty Ghosts features a silent protagonist by the name of Logan. Logan never says a fucking thing. Logan watches his dad get shot in the chest and gets taken away by some bald guy to be tortured in South America without ever uttering a single word. This is awkward. The game tries so hard to make you care about these characters, and Logan here, being silent, doesn't work. You can't do both these silent protagonists and give the character a strong personality and story. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Honestly, it's not even the fact that Link doesn't speak, it's the fact that he rarely shows any emotion in these cutscenes. He looks either stern or like he's about to die from a Guardian Blast. Twilight Princess also features a silent Link, but he shows so much more emotion. We see his pain when the kids from the Ordon village are kidnapped, or when he finds out his childhood friend has lost her memory. We watch him go from a simple boy living in a village in the middle of the woods to a strong hero that Hyrule needs. It's very possible to do the silent protagonist thing correctly, but Breath of the Wild seems to have pushed that aside for more of a focus on Zelda herself. Zelda in this game, in my humble opinion, is the best Zelda we've ever seen, and that's only compounded by Tears of the Kingdom. I may have problems with Tears of the Kingdom, but Zelda as a character is not one of them. In Breath of the Wild, we see that Zelda is very interested in technology. She has a love for ancient Sheikah tech, and she wants to research it more. She clearly has a passion for it. However, this passion is in direct opposition to her role as the Princess of Hyrule. Her duty is to unlock her sealing power before Ganon returns. Yet, she finds that the burden of such a task is far more difficult to bear than to research technology and enjoy herself. From this, we see the strained relationship with Zelda's father and how Urbosa has kind of taken up a mother-like role for the princess after the passing of her own mother. Zelda, more than ever before, feels like a person and less of a plot device. She's not just the damsel in distress, she's like an ogre. She has layers. And I know that some of you in the comments are about to go, but Spirit Tracks and Tetra, and I've never played Spirit Tracks and I've barely played the Wind Waker, so I can't speak to those games. In my opinion, this is the best Zelda we've ever seen. I think the story of this game focusing on Zelda was a very wise decision. The DLC, being named the Champion's Ballad, focuses on Zelda quite a bit. I think the choice to focus on her was a really good decision because she's the best character, honestly. Or perhaps she is the best character because they focus on her so much. Could be either way. All of this is to say that I don't really play Breath of the Wild for the story. I play Skyward Sword because I love its puzzles and I love its story. I play Twilight Princess because I love the epic journey that it takes me on. I play Breath of the Wild to be immersed in a world created with so much love and detail. And above all, to tell my own story. I think people need to take a step back and recognize that the story of Breath of the Wild is what you make it. They honestly could have given us 0 cutscenes and the game would largely remain the same, though I am happy for the narrative that we got. How you discover shrines, how you unlock pieces of the world map, how you do anything is the story of Breath of the Wild. The big narrative already happened a century ago. You're writing the epilogue. If this game were called The Legend of Zelda: Downfall of Hyrule, then this would undoubtedly be the ending chapter. If Breath of the Wild left you feeling a little empty in terms of its story, I recommend playing Age of Calamity. While yes, it is a different timeline than Breath of the Wild, you get to see the Calamity occur and the recruitment of the champions in greater detail, and even witness Link pull the Master Sword. It's a very good story, though I don't think it's considered canon. I like to think of it as canon, but just in a different timeline, but that's just me. I don't really care what the official Zelda timeline says. It's important to note that the lead up to each of the Divine Beasts, which I went over earlier, is also a massive part of the story that you tell. Did you sneak by that Lionel to get those electric arrows, or did you take it head on? When getting the Thunder Helm, did you sneak above the Eagle Soldiers or use bananas to lure them away? Hell, finding all 12 memories is a journey in its own way. For my first playthrough, I needed help from the Sheikah painter, Pigongo. However, in each subsequent playthrough, I became more and more familiar with Hyrule and needed to use him less and less. Hell, in the footage you're watching, I didn't even bother to get all 12 of the memories. I know the story. I know what's going on. I don't need to do that for the purpose of this review. There's many different ways to play this game and write your own story. And I think people playing this, especially the old Zelda fans, miss that. This is what Miyamoto set out to make in 1986. This is probably very close to what he envisioned the original Zelda would be. Anyway, if you do want more of a story out of this game, I recommend checking out the DLC. As I stated a moment ago, it adds a ton to the world and brings more life to the champions. Something that this game offers to further your own story is DLC content, and lots of it. Much of the DLC content is honestly just fan service. We can find various outfits and trinkets from previous Zelda games, very similar to how we could use amiibos in Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is the reason I bought my first amiibo, and I think my only amiibo, to be honest. I love the Twilight Princess outfit so much that I bought the Smash Bros. Link amiibo for this game. I won't say much about the amiibo content just because I only have the one amiibo and none else, but most of it is silly cosmetic stuff. I do not like, though, that you can only get Epona through Amiibo. That's a damn shame. Finding Epona in Hyrule via some horse race type quest or some other thing like that would have been amazing. Epona is an excellent starter horse as she has 4 stars across the board in strength, stamina, and speed. While she's definitely not the best horse in the game, she is good for most of any given playthrough. If you're going to travel long distances, she's a great companion to have by your side. Other small things such as the various Link outfits from previous games are fine as Amiibo content. They're not that special. In terms of the actual DLC content that you paid for, I like to go through it in 2 sections, DLC 1 and DLC 2, just to kind of keep our ducks in a row here. So we'll start with DLC 1. DLC 1 offers 2 main attractions, Master Mode and the Trial of the Sword. Both of these are fantastic additions to the game. Master Mode is a long-standing staple of the Zelda series. Many games prior to Breath of the Wild offer a Master Quest or a Second Quest that would make the game harder by revamping dungeons and making heart drops more rare. In Breath of the Wild, Master Mode levels up every monster by 1. Red bokoblins become blue, blue becomes black, black becomes silver, and silver becomes gold. Gold enemies are entirely unique to Master Mode. They feature much higher resistance to electric attacks, and according to the lore, are silver bokoblins that were struck by lightning, which is metal as fuck. On top of this, enemies now regenerate health if they aren't attacked in a rapid succession. This made things like Trial of the Sword and boss fights a fucking nightmare sometimes. Finally, Master Mode features these little floating platforms held up by Sky Octoroks. On these platforms we can find enemies in little chests. These are typically placed along paths and act as small extra challenges to face throughout the world. One of the best examples of this is the Bridge of Hylia, where before we simply had a couple of Zolfos to deal with, there are now bokoblins that shoot bomb arrows, making this area far more challenging. It's also worth noting that Master Mode gets rid of all but one of your autosaves. Before, if you made a big mistake several minutes ago, you could go back to, maybe a few autosaves earlier and go back to where you were and nothing ever happened, you'd be fine. However, in Master Mode, you get one autosave. That's it, and when you die, you go back to that autosave. That's it, there's no way to avoid that. It's pretty cool. Master Mode also expands the compendium by virtue of having a whole new tier of monsters to fight. Throughout the world, there are exactly one of each base level Bokoblin, Moblin, and Lizalfos. They did this so that you could still completely fill out the compendium without having to buy the little compendium things from the guy in Hateno Village. So that's really, really cool. The first one of these base level monsters that I found was the Lizalfos, which can be found between the Great Plateau and the Gerudo Desert. It's somewhere in that area, I don't exactly remember where, but you'll find it, I don't know. The second one I found is the Red Moblin, which is found at a hot spring in Hebra, and I love that it's just chilling up here. I think that's really funny. The Red Bokoblin, funny enough, is found right next to the Great Plateau. I think it's really fun that Nintendo hid these base level monsters in these locations. It was very fun to find them organically, and if you've never played Master Mode before, I'm sorry I just spoiled that for you. The final boss in particular is drawn out due to the health regen mechanic. I know I didn't talk about the final boss much, or Hyrule Castle for that matter, but both of these things are great, and Master Mode makes them even more fun. Calamity Ganon is far more formidable when he can heal from the wounds inflicted upon him. It might be a good idea to upgrade your Master Sword if you're going to do a Master Mode playthrough though. That of course brings us to the Trial of the Sword. Upon receiving the Master Sword, Link has the option to place it back into its pedestal to overcome 3 trials set up by ancient Sheikah monks. These trials are more or less combat gauntlets that strip the player of all of their gear, much like Eventide Island, but ask them to go through several levels of increasingly difficult enemies. If you die, your run is over. This is an excellent challenge. It really tests your skills and knowledge of the game's various mechanics. Sure, combat is challenged, but it also asks you to approach the combat in a variety of ways that are unconventional. After completing each of the 3 trials, the Master Sword's damage is upped by 10, with the final one giving it 60 damage and extremely increased durability. In Master Mode, this is an insanely difficult thing to pull off. In fact, I actually glitched my way through the first trial entirely. However, I was unable to pull this off with the second one and the third one. Those glitches are kind of hard to do, and they actually might be patched, I don't know. So I had to go through them in the way that God intended. It wasn't until late 2024 that I finally worked up the courage to take on the final trials, and I beat it on my first attempt. It was a long and sometimes terrifying attempt, but I did it. It's an incredible feat that I think every Breath of the Wild player should attempt. Getting through the trials in Master Mode is really a test of your knowledge of the game. It took me over 1,000 hours to finally complete it. Granted, I'd taken long breaks between playing the game over the years, but you get the point. Other than these 2 challenges, DLC offers little quests to find various pieces of gears. These are all things from previous Zelda games, including the Phantom Armor set, the Tingle's outfit, Majora's Mask, and so much more. I've spoken about how I feel about Majora's Mask, but I do feel like it can kill like the challenge of Master Mode, just because it's so close to the Great Plateau. The other armor sets are really fun and I enjoyed finding them. They are hidden really well and it makes you explore places more deeply than you otherwise would. Some places I would simply ride by on my way to another location, not really giving them much thought, but these tiny quests give me a reason to explore further and think more about the world I'm exploring. DLC 2 also brings more gear, but more importantly, DLC 2 offers more story, more shrines, and more difficult challenges, and of course, another divine beast. The Champion's Ballad is one of my favorite pieces of DLC to any video game of all time. Some of you are probably thinking, what the fuck? Have you played Shadow of the Erdtree? Have you bought any of the Xenoblade Chronicles DLCs? And no, I have not. Not yet. I'm going to buy the DLC for 3, but I haven't gotten around to it yet, okay? Seriously though, this DLC takes everything that an experienced player should know about the world and challenges them on it. From the outset, players are tasked with a challenge that sets the tone for the rest of the DLC. After completing the 4 main Divine Beasts, we are challenged by monk Maz Kasha to return the Sheikah Slate to the pedestal where we found it in the Shrine of Resurrection. Doing so gives us the one-hit obliterator, a weapon that kills anything in one hit, but also weakens the wielder to die in one hit. This is more or less a glorified stealth mission where you have to kill enemies using an extremely powerful weapon while not letting anything touch you, not even a goddamn bee or tripping over a ledge. We have to defeat enemies to unlock 4 more shrines in the plateau, giving us an extra heart. Nice! After this is completed, we return the obliterator to its resting place and it shoots out some wacky stuff which activates 4 pedestals across Hyrule, coinciding with each of the 4 divine beasts. Essentially, we are tasked with truly mastering each divine beast. We do this by talking to our old friend Cass, listening to his teacher's unfinished songs, and using them to unlock 3 shrines at each of the 4 major areas. Completing an area's shrines unlocks a more challenging version against the corresponding Blight Ganon, where the devs have severely limited what gear the player has access to. Yes, this is a bitch and a half in Master Mode. Thunder Blight in particular was fucking painful. All of these new shrines are more difficult and interesting than the ones in the base games. In many ways, they feel longer and more thought out. They feel like mini dungeons as opposed to mini sections of a dungeon like normal shrines do. I love this. It's very nice. These are by far the best shrines in the game. They even made a major test of strength plus, which is fun because it subverts your expectations. I had always wondered where the Guardians come from, and this shrine gives us that answer. It's fun. After completing each major area's boss fight, we are treated to a cutscene of Princess Zelda recruiting the 4 champions. This gives us more backstory into each of them while also giving the additional backstory into Zelda herself, which is always lovely. We found out that Daruk has a fear of dogs, which is very funny and a detail that I forgot about until I played the game again for footage. The Champion's Ballad really does enhance the story. It's very clear that Nintendo themselves were at least a little unhappy with the base game's story, or they knew that the fans were a little bit unhappy, so they wanted to add on top of that for people who love the game and love this Hyrule. I think that's great. You could also argue that the existence of Age of Calamity is also because of that story. And of course, we have the 5th Divine Beast. Once we complete all 4 areas, we must return to where it all began and discover that the Shrine of Resurrection itself is a massive elevator, and we travel deep underground where we are introduced to a labyrinth. This Divine Beast is amazing. Thematically, it's very final, and mechanically, it really tests the player's abilities to use the runes on the Sheikah Slate. I will admit though, simply turning this gear as the only moving part of the Divine Beast is a bit of a letdown. I was hoping they'd have like a few more different functions that I could play around with, but I don't have much that I want to say in particular about the puzzles because I don't really want to spoil the solutions to most of them, but I will say, in the footage you're watching, I tried my hardest to wind bomb my way to every single one of these pedestals, and it was the most fun I've had in a Divine Beast ever. It's so funny that I can cheat these. I love it. Now, of course, as I've said before, I don't recommend that you cheat your dungeons on your first playthrough. Try to solve them the way they are intended. Trust yourself. But if it's like your 3rd playthrough through the game, cheat it. Have fun. It's your game. Have fun with it, you know? Just see what happens. Anyway, The Divine Beast's boss is also quite the twist as well. We've seen well over 100 of these monks at the end of each shrine. We see what happens. They give us a spirit orb and then they whisk away off into nothingness. This monk, Maz Kasha, fucking stands up after presumably 10,000 years and makes Link fight him as the final challenge. Suddenly, we are lifted above Hyrule fighting a Sheikah monk on a floating island. I could only imagine what the people on the ground below thought when they saw this shit happening above them. This boss fight is really fun, and like everything else in the DLC, is a test of your knowledge. And of course, that brings us to the reward for all of this. The Master Cycle Zero, a dirt bike for Link to ride. This was, no doubt, inspired by the concept art for Breath of the Wild, where Link wore like a sick jacket and rode a dirt bike around. It seems that Nintendo couldn't really let that idea go entirely. This bike is so fucking cool, they put it in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. That's all I'm saying. You can do wheelies on this thing, you can jump around on it, it's got a fucking headlight for the nighttime. It's fueled by monster parts and all the other random clutter in your inventory. You got like 500 apples, you can use 10 of them to refuel your bike. Pretty cool. While these bigger items are a lot of fun, I do think that the DLC outfits are amazing as well. The Royal Guard outfit in particular is one of my favorites. You've probably seen it a lot in this footage, but I love it. It very intentionally matches the color of the Hylian shield, and as such, it looks fantastic. Many of the DLC outfits, though, cannot be upgraded, which is a bit of a shame. This outfit would have been awesome and a viable piece of armor if it could be. It offers no benefits other than looking cool, I guess. I simply do not understand why Nintendo did not allow for this one to be upgraded. Finding things like Link's lobster shirt from the Wind Waker, Ravio's hood, or ancient horse armor is really awesome. And I love how the game doesn't outright point you to where these things are, but rather they give you, sometimes obvious, hints as to where these things can be found. Many other games would point you directly to such things, but I think letting players figure it out is in its own way a small puzzle, and this series is known for its puzzles. Looking at the DLC as a whole, Master Mode, Trial of the Sword, and the new shrines and the Divine Beasts make it all worth $20. For $20, that's far more content than other games would give for the same price. Hell, some games' microtransactions are that price, if not more. Listen, I'm just gonna say this. Breath of the Wild and its DLC is a much better value than Tears of the Kingdom for $70. I can totally understand why people prefer the sequel, but I will always have a special place in my heart for this game's original content and world. And that brings me to the final segment of this video.
We exploit the world we live in. We don't treat it with love, gentleness, and respect. We cut down millions of acres of forest to turn it into newspaper of all things. Lovely trees turned into information about nothing, and we don't replace them properly. We kick the world around in revenge for feeling that, really, we are the puppets which the world kicks around.
I am only briefly discussing Tears of the Kingdom because I feel it learned and didn't learn some lessons from Breath of the Wild. If you want to see reviews on these games, I recommend I Hate Tears of the Kingdom by Skitty Bitty. It's a particularly critical deep dive into the game's many flaws, but more than that, Skitty here isn't afraid to have a little nuance, something that is rare on the internet. If you want a counter argument to that video, I recommend How Tears of the Kingdom Rebuilds 3D Zelda by King K. It again is a very nuanced video, this time from the perspective of someone who loves this game. Watching both of these videos gives you both sides of the argument as to the good and the bad things about Tears of the Kingdom, and I can say I firmly sit somewhere in the middle of these two positions. Tears of the Kingdom attempts to more or less one-up Breath of the Wild in every way. Attempts to. In some ways, it certainly does. I would argue that the story is a little bit more interesting this time, even if I take issue with its presentation and some of the key plot points. In particular, being able to find all the cutscenes in any order will completely shatter the plot if you aren't careful about which ones you get. You could spoil the main plot for yourself with one cutscene, and that's frankly pretty awful. Something that Tears of the Kingdom seems to excel at upon a first glance is dungeon design. I think most people would say that Tears of the Kingdom has better dungeon design than Breath of the Wild. Thematically, I guess I can agree. As I said in the dungeon section, I think many people overlook the point of all the Divine Beasts looking the same, but I'll concede that the Wind Temple and the Fire Temple do look pretty cool. However, mechanically, I find these dungeons to be far worse than Breath of the Wild. While Tears of the Kingdom greatly expands on Link's toolbag, it does very little to limit the player's decisions. This, on one hand, goes deeper into that freedom aspect that the game is setting out to do, and in that case I guess you could say it succeeds. But on the other hand, this means that most of the dungeons are incredibly easy to cheat, like to an infuriating degree. The Fire Temple is where I caught on to this. And sure, in Breath of the Wild you could cheat some parts of Divine Beast like I did with the last one, but honestly, most of the time, like wind bombing or glitching your way to a thing takes more effort and more of a challenge than just doing the puzzle as intended. But Tears of the Kingdom takes this to a whole other level. By making a simple air bike out of 2 fans and a steering stick, you are able to bypass most of the puzzles in this dungeon. You can just fly to the next location and bam, activate the terminal thingy. This isn't even mentioning that each dungeon in this game is a copy and paste from Breath of the Wild's mechanic of go inside, find the map, find the 5 little things, and then boss fight. No mid-boss, no linearity to it, no new items to use, just the same style of dungeon from Breath of the Wild. The only exception to this is the Lightning Temple. This is the closest thing to a traditional Zelda dungeon, and I think that it bridges the gap from the old style with the new style perfectly. It taking place inside of a tight building with little room to build means the player is very limited on their ability to cheat, but still has fun ways of non-linear progression. I think it's the strongest dungeon in the game, and the other ones just suck. They're all bad. The cutscene that plays at the end of each dungeon is bad. But I don't want to go too deep into it, I apologize for that, but speaking about Tears of the Kingdom overall, I think many people would say, if you had to pick one, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, you should probably pick Tears of the Kingdom. And I disagree with this wholeheartedly. Not because I dislike many parts of the game, though I definitely do, but because I think players will appreciate the many changes and expansions of Breath of the Wild's formula if they play Breath of the Wild first. The story is better enhanced, though that's not saying much. The connection of Calamity Ganon and Ganondorf is a super cool one, and I think it's so fun, and you'll never understand that connection or fully understand the experience of it if you never play Breath of the Wild. And Tears of the Kingdom does its damnedest to disconnect itself from Breath of the Wild, and I think that's a damn shame, because so many things are enhanced by it. The expansion of the world brings fresh experiences to the players that have already been there. The caves and the wells that dot the land really hit home for me. They are an amazing addition to the game, and honestly, they add so much to places I've already been to. It's so fun to go to these new places where I've been and find a little cave, find a new little secret. It just enhances the world, and none of that would be the same if I hadn't already played Breath of the Wild. However, one part of the expansion of the world is pretty bad, and that of course is the depths. Honestly, there are likely entire video essays on why the depths suck, and I agree with some of that, but I will say the depths do add some context to parts of the Breath of the Wild's world. For example, why is there a hot spring in the Heber region? Well, it's because there's a lava pool below it in the depths. Story Mountain has a Bloopy Burrow as its counterpart in the depths. Things like this are really fun, and there's plenty more of them. However, the depths really are just like one biome repeated over and over and over again with little variation. At first, discovering the depths is really exciting. Nobody knew about this feature before the game launched. But by the end of the game, I think I found it to just be a chore. Sure, it's an entire new Hyrule with tons of content, but Hyrule has like diversity in its biomes and the animals you can find. This is just bland. The reason I'm bringing up Tears of the Kingdom at all is because I see many people online debate which of the two games is better, and not to be that guy, but I really do think this is a meaningless debate. While I prefer Breath of the Wild over Tears of the Kingdom, I think it's a bit silly to claim that one is objectively better than the other, or even argue about which one is better. They have two very different purposes. At the end of the day, I really do think that playing both is probably the way to go. Honestly, I think you should play Breath of the Wild first, then Age of Calamity, and then Tears of the Kingdom. While Age of Calamity isn't canon, it's very fun to see the events of the Great Calamity. And that's where I'm going to stop talking about Tears of the Kingdom. Go watch the videos that I mentioned. They're in the description. They're definitely worth watching, both of them.
But from the point of view I am expressing, the real you is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real, deep down you is the whole universe. and it's doing your living organism and all its behavior. It's expressing it, as a singer sings a song.
May I ask, do you really remember me?
There will never be another game like Breath of the Wild. It, in many ways, redefined open-world games in the same way that Ocarina of Time revolutionized 3D adventure games back in 1998. Every decade or so, Nintendo creates a game that just defines the next generation of gamers. For me, that was like Super Mario Galaxy in 2007. For some of you, it might be Super Mario 64 or Mario Odyssey. For many Zelda fans, Ocarina of Time or A Link to the Past were those games that defined their childhoods. For me, Breath of the Wild is the game that defined my latter teen years. I have never spent more time in a virtual world than Breath of the Wild. Several games have come close over the years, but none have been as realistic, impactful, and pardon the dramatics, life-changing as this game. The animals populating the land aren't just NPCs to be hunted. They breathe, they sleep, they hunt, they graze, they move around. The monsters that have made camps across the land eat together, communicate, plan, have their own art and cultures, and of course, the people of Hyrule and the many races therein are teeming with life and personality. It's very clear to me that the focus of this game was to create an experience that anyone can truly immerse themselves in. Those nights that I stayed up late on weekends just exploring Hyrule for the first time are nights that I will never forget. I can remember my first time getting a Switch Pro controller and feeling the stellar difference between it and my Joy-Con grip. How much easier the motion controls made aiming, even the sounds of my dad's house as people walked around or wind blew up against my weirdly loose window that I could still hear in my head that was in my bedroom. I play this game and recall all of that. I also recall showing it off to my friends. I recall beating Ganon for the first time, or the hours I spent learning to wind bomb, which is something that you definitely should do. It's very fun. Those will always be my memories. That will always be my story. When you boot up the game and find your way around the Great Plateau, and then you find your way into the rest of the world, that is the introduction to your story. I actually think an entire video essay on the Great Plateau would be a really fun follow-up to this one. To all the Zelda fans, I'm sure that this video has attracted, or not, if it's a flip-flop. I know it seems like I focus on Minecraft content looking at my other videos. I hope it's obvious by now that I'm making this video and I'm seeking a radical shift in my art. Long-form videos have always been what I wanted to make and what I've been inspired to make. King K is probably my biggest influence, along the likes of H-Bomber Guy, a couple other people that I can't remember the names of, but if I saw them, I would know. These are all channels that make very long videos and go really in-depth with things, and that is what I love. To my longtime fans who have been here for a couple of years, I hope this video provided something different and fresh for you. I spent months working on it. In the same way that Breath of the Wild is a total reimagination of 3D Zelda and a callback to what Zelda was always supposed to be, you could consider this video to be a reimagining of this channel and a callback to the original vision I had for it once I got back into gaming content. Art is incredibly inspiring. Artists are inspired by other art. Whether that art be man-made or the result of cosmic choice matters not. We all find inspiration. Some of us see it in our parents or in our children. Some of us see it in our peers. The art around us drives us to continue to create more. It can sometimes be daunting and difficult to not let that growth become more of a chore of bloated expectations, but if done right, creation is probably the deepest way to show the universe just who you are. I've probably said this before, but art is simply a way of the universe to express itself to itself. It's kind of like holding up a mirror to another mirror, and honestly, we show other people our art because we want them to see that it makes up who we are, and we want them to see and enjoy that creation. When people make art together, it really becomes a collection of people who are pouring their hearts into something that is truly special. There will never be another Breath of the Wild. In the same way that there will never be another version of this exact video. You're watching a version of me that no longer exists. This is a microscopic view, a tiny piece of who I am that is forever on the internet, or until YouTube dies out, I guess. That's very special. It's why I encourage people to get into art, whether it be painting, music, coding a game, or writing a novel, or coming up with new things to do with your friends and family. Do it. Create whatever it may be that you want. Hell, I purchased a coding course sometime last year and I've barely touched it. Now that I've gotten a break from working on this video, perhaps I'll take the time to work on that, and someday I can share all the creations I have with all of you. Until then, thank you all so much for watching this video. It's been a lot of writing and a lot of editing and rewriting these sections and so much more. But I'm sure that by the time you're seeing this, I will be taking a well-deserved nap and feeling proud of my creation. Go play Breath of the Wild. You won't regret it. Maybe I'll buy a copy of the game and do a giveaway on my Discord. I don't know, might be fun. Let me know if you want to see something similar, like a deep dive into the Great Plateau or something like that. And no, I will not be making a video on Tears of the Kingdom. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this one, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.